If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
People who genuinely didn't believe in paranormal events, but started believing. Why? What did you see? Share your true encounter story that made you a believer.
The following is just my opinion. It may be extreme or outlandish. I apologize for the rambling. First, please don't mess with Ouija boards. People have varying opinions on them, but many people believe that the practice of necromancy is basically inviting things you cannot comprehend to attach themselves to you on a spiritual level. The type that usually answers the call isn't here to help you. These beings are basically vampires that feed off your natural energy. Second, there is a reason ghosts appear some places at some times and not others. There are different types of ghosts. The human ghosts we see are very, very rarely a full-on disembodied soul. When our bodies die, our consciousness transcends to another dimension. Even as you read this, your consciousness is partly in at least one other dimension. Read about quantum entanglement and the double-slit experiment, and follow the rabbit hole. You'll understand why this physical universe isn't as real as we are led to believe. I personally believe in reincarnation. So, I don't think the soul wanders the earth very long after death. Instead, we leave behind spiritual residue in our physical lives. Emotionally charged moments are more likely to leave an imprint in a place. This imprint can replay for some reason at varying frequencies, even while you're still alive. This is one reason people experience hearing footsteps, doors slam, etc. This definitely is only responsible for some paranormal experiences. People see many things that aren't human spirits. Shadow people, for instance, are very common. That's an entirely different rabbit hole, though. My point is that there is no way to know what is around you at any given moment because we only see 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum. String theory says there are various universes living exactly where we are but in different frequencies and vibrations. The ancients believed the same thing. Lastly, some people see ghosts because their consciousness hasn't been as limited by the mental constructs society gives you from the start. Your mind and its intention have abilities that would astound you. This power also works in the negative. If you truly believe something not to be real or possible, then, for you, it likely never will be without intervention. If your mind is open enough, eventually you will have experiences that you can't explain away. Just be careful and don't treat any information like it's absolute. There are no absolutes. So let's dive into the encounter stories of others who believe in the paranormal or why they started believing it in the first place. What did they see? I once saw what looked like a figure of a man hovering about half a meter above the middle of the road. The figure looked like it was made of smoke/mist. It was a really clear night, about 4 a.m. I was half asleep in the passenger seat when I saw it and just put it down to hallucinations from tiredness. Then my colleague, who was driving, asked if I'd just seen it too and described exactly what I just saw. I described the events to another colleague later that shift, who works in the ambulance service, and they mentioned that they had responded to a car crash at that location a few years earlier, where a car swerved off the road because the driver saw the figure of a man standing in the road, even though there was no evidence of anyone being there. It turns out that there have been multiple sightings of the same figure on that road. I'm still skeptical, though. I didn't believe in ghosts before, and I don't believe in them now, but I can't account for why other people have seen the same thing. We were gone for a couple of months. The day after we got home, we saw our neighbor's son walking his dog like he always does. My husband pulled over the car, and we had a lovely little chat. A couple days later I spoke to my neighbor, and he told us his son had died. I was shocked and blurted out, "Oh no. I just talked to him a couple days ago." "When did this happen?" The neighbor said he died a couple weeks ago. "We were out of town a couple of weeks ago." There was no mistake. The craziest part is that he looked completely normal in the daylight, and he was walking the dog that is still alive. 10 years ago, I went to the Montparnasse Cemetery in Paris to see Baudelaire's grave with my mom and my friend. I decided to take a walk alone on a path near the street and admire the architecture. 20 minutes later, I was calling my friend and told him that I would go back to our car and wait for them there, and as I was just saying that, a woman dressed in black walked on the path in the opposite direction, pushing a loud cart. I stood up still and continued my phone call, but then, she literally disappeared behind a goddamn grave while casually walking. Blinked 10 times and run out of the cemetery like Forrest Gump. Still don't know what I saw. Also, I forgot to mention that she looked extremely old. Her back was literally bending in half on her cart or whatever the hell this thing was, and that's why I was watching her carefully in the first place. Such a trauma. A visit. My boyfriend's mom died almost 6 years ago. Leading up to her death, She changed as a person and became addicted to painkillers after mysteriously being diagnosed with MS without any family history. Once she became addicted to painkillers, their relationship changed because she became an entirely different person, mentally and physically. They never got along anymore. She cheated on his father and stopped working. Before all of this happened, they had a great mother-son relationship. One night she had a seizure in her bedroom and passed away. My boyfriend was in the house the entire time, but since they weren't close anymore, he didn't think much of the fact she hadn't come out of her room in a long time. When his brother got home from school, he went into her room, and she was black in color and cold to the touch. About 2 months after she passed, the TV would shut off, the air conditioner would shut off, and he felt like he was always being watched. When he would walk through the house, he always felt like he was being followed by somebody, and nobody would be there. One night, he walked into the bathroom and looked into the mirror, and she was right behind him, smiling. She visited him in the form he loved her the most in, when she was healthy and kind to him. It gave him such a sense of comfort seeing her, so healthy. It'll be 6 years in December since she died. There hasn't been any other experience since then until a few days ago, when we were having a bit of a heated discussion about a sensitive topic. My boyfriend has extreme depression, anxiety, and PTSD, so he has his good days and his bad. This day was one of his bad days. We live in the house he grew up in and, actually, in the master bedroom where his mother died. During our discussion, his mother came up, and I was telling him how proud I know she is of him. For some reason, I could just feel the happiness and how proud she was. It's almost like I didn't even think when I said it, it just came out. Immediately after I said that, sitting on our windowsill nowhere near the edge at all, I had a small liquor bottle. All of a sudden it goes flying off the windowsill and hits the floor. I immediately said, "That's your mom." I just knew it. I believe in the paranormal, and so does he. There's no possible way that bottle could have fallen on its own. I feel blessed she is watching over us. It's comforting. I'm convinced that a little boy haunted my first apartment. Lying in bed at night, something was gently pinching my big toe. Enough to wake me up, and I could still feel it. But I was too scared to look down at what it could be. After a few times of this, I even whispered to it, "Please let me go?" And the feeling slowly left my foot. It happened a few more times before I told my husband. He asked me to wake him next time it happens. So a few nights later I feel the hand holding my toe, so I nudge my husband and say, "Hey, babe?" He says, "Do you feel it?" I said yes. He whispers back, "Okay," because I feel him too. When I was around 8 to 9 years old, my father dropped my older brothers, younger sister, and me off at my grandparents' house. My grandparents live out in the country in a sort of cottage on a farm. I was out in the barn with the newborn calves when I felt something hit my arm. I looked down and noticed a dark red substance. Instinctively I looked up, and to my surprise there was a chicken hanging on a wire from the barn beams. I freaked out and ran into the house looking for my brothers since my grandparents were out in the field baling hay at the time. They didn't believe me when I told them what I saw, so they went to see for themselves. When they came back from the barn, they said that there was nothing there. The next morning when I woke up we went downstairs to eat breakfast. I guess my grandparents noticed that I kept itching my back and sides. They made me lift my shirt to see if I have a rash, which is pretty normal since there's a lot of poison ivy around their house in the barn. I remember my gram yelling something at my grandfather and my brothers looking quite disturbed. Apparently there were handprints on my torso, lower back, and shoulder blade. For the next few days my little sister had been exhibiting some pretty similar things, but some of them were a little worse. And by a little worse I mean things like dead birds being dropped at the end of her bed or books falling off her shelf. Only once was there an incident where she was injured. It was when she was working on her journaling at her desk and she found a note in her journal. I don't remember what the note said, though. When she woke up the next morning, that's when it happened. I didn't see any of it before she got in the shower and washed off, but my grandma and oldest brother did. They said it looked like someone took a pencil or needle and poked holes in her hands and that they were covered in blood. Nothing else has happened to us since then, but it's still a terrifying memory. I could shit myself just thinking about it. In 1998 I saw a little child holding my son's Mega Drive controller. After a few seconds he disappeared and it dropped to the floor. The first thing I did was check on my son. He was fast asleep in bed. The flat always had a really horrible feeling. I've had lots of experiences over the years. A lot happens when I'm with my sister. About 20 years ago we were sitting in a pub having lunch. Not drinking alcohol, when we saw a black figure walk out of the wall, come through our table, and go through the other wall. When we were teenagers, we saw a man waving at us while we were visiting our granddad's grave, and then he just disappeared. Strange things. I've had quite a few. I'm positive that my parents' property is haunted. There was this one time I had a couple of friends over. It was towards the end of summer, beginning of fall. School was starting shortly, we were going into 6th grade. We were going to sleep in a tent in the yard. A little backstory, my parents bought the house next to us and tore it down, so we had a pretty nice sized yard. We also inherited a light pole with the street light pointing in towards the yard, rather than the street, with the property. So, anyway, we were goofing around as young men do all day, and at night we were in the tent still messing around. Then we see a shadow. I said, it's probably someone walking down the street, because the light points in. But the shadow was getting closer. Then I thought, hey, it's my dad coming out here to try and scare us. Then we realized there was no sound from steps. Like, we would hear my dad walking, stepping on leaves and things like that. My dad is a lot of things, but discreet is not one of them, lol. As the shadow got to the tent, we were freaking the hell out. Then, the shadow started to walk around the tent and then became 3 shadows. They were just silently walking around the tent. Scared out of our minds, I screamed, "Who's out there?" The shadows stopped. There was no response, but we could still see the shadows. I grabbed the zipper and looked at my friends, and they looked back like they were up to whatever I had in mind. So, I started counting down from 3, I hit 1, unzipped that tent faster than I ever have, and the 3 of us jumped out, and no one was there. Now, when I said 1 and unzipped the tent, we could still see the shadows. There's no way that 1, let alone 3, people can just disappear that fast in my yard. We would have seen and or heard them, definitely would have seen them. We went in and slept in my room. I still occasionally talk with one of the guys that was there that night. I asked him about 5 months ago if he remembers that night. I don't think putting his exact response on here would be appropriate, but, yes, he remembers. The first exposure I had to the paranormal was a picture taken in a relative's home back in the 80s when I was a kid. My relatives had just moved into a home on the outskirts of Atlanta and had taken a series of photos documenting the home and contents for insurance provenance purposes. My great-uncle had taken the entire roll of photos alone in the home, and they were all normal aside from one of a full-length mirror affixed to a door in the basement. In the mirror was a semi-transparent image of a strikingly fair lady with very fair pallor and dark hair. She was wearing a very elegant dress that was definitely not modern and holding one of those old saucer-style candlestick holders that was alight with a greenish-blue hue, and she had a dark-colored cat on her shoulder. The relatives who bought that home went on to sell it eventually and moved to Florida, and all of the relatives who had the most intense first-hand experiences in the home have long since passed, and my aunt, who seems to be the designated keeper of family albums, has not come across the photo again as of yet, but it was infamous amongst my family for years, and I can still remember it vividly in my mind because it was mortifying to 8-year-old me, and I'll never forget overhearing my granny's encounter and wishing I never had. I don't believe in ghosts, but this happened. Up here. Okay, I live alone, with my cat, and a girl stayed over at my house for the night, and in the morning she said she dreamt about a lady talking to her who lived in the house. Nothing too interesting, and I promptly forgot about it. Then a couple of weeks later another girl was staying over, and she freaked the duck out in the morning. Apparently a lady was shouting at her and telling her to get out of her house during the night. However, the lady was speaking through my cat, which was also slapping me in the face. The girl told me it was too vivid to be a dream. This perked my interest a little more. So I was talking to my ex and made a joke about a ghost in my house. She went white and said, "You've seen her too?" Okay, honestly the incident freaked me out a little, but I really love where I live and my house, and the ghost hadn't done anything to me. My ex explained that this woman would sometimes watch us when we slept and stand in the doorway. All doors are open in my house, I live alone, remember. My ex thought it was her imagination, and she also liked me, the house, and the cat, so she kept quiet about it and didn't stress. But then one night soon after, I was going to bed, and on the way I had to walk past a tiny unused bathroom that is always closed. There are 3 bathrooms in my house, I have no idea why, but I just used the one downstairs and the nicer bathroom upstairs. As I was going to bed, I was thinking about the lady the girls had seen, and I thought to myself, duck her, it's my house, if there's a ghost, I'd fight it, I'm not scared, etc. etc. I was engaging in deep thinking while trying to sound confident. Then as I walked past the unused bathroom. Bang! Loud as hell. A great smash on the door from the inside, as though someone punched it hard. I saw the door move and shake. I was frozen. Duck all that tough guy crap, I was thinking. I was literally frozen on the spot. I did shout out instinctively, "Who's ducking there?" Then silence. Nothing more. Now, I'm not a girl, so I can't run to my neighbors or call an ex to come over. So I edged past the bathroom and sat on my bed, still very shaken. It must have sat a while, but eventually I worked up enough courage to approach the bathroom, turned on the light switch, which is on the outside, and somehow I managed to open the door, and nothing. Empty, exactly as I left it. I don't really believe in ghost stories, but many creepy things happened to me when I was a kid. I still remember one night when I was sleeping, and out of nowhere I heard a child laughing right next to my ear. I woke up instantly, looked around, but there was absolutely no one there. To this day, I think it was probably just my fear playing tricks on me, maybe from watching too many horror movies back then, lol. Another time, when I was a kid hanging out with my friends, there was this old building that everyone used to say was haunted. Even the guard of the building used to tell us scary stories about it. I'm pretty sure now he was just trying to freak us out. One day, we decided to go check it out for ourselves. The haunted apartment was on one of the upper floors, and I remember being almost the last one going up. When we got there, the door was actually wide open. The second we saw that, we all panicked and ran. I tripped and fell flat on my face while running away. Lamau. Later we found out that people were actually interested in buying the place, so it was probably just them inside. Still, at the time, maybe not sure, it felt like a real horror movie, to be honest. One of my closest friends shared the story with me. Last year he went to Pennsylvania as an au pair, and his host parents lived in a large colonial house. That's how we call this kind of house here in Italy. One day he had to do the laundry, but he was home alone with a little boy he was supposed to take care of and decided to take the kid in the basement with him so he could do both things. While he was washing his clothes, he heard the child talking to himself. He thought the boy was talking to him, so he approached him and asked what he was saying. He replied that he wasn't talking to him but to his grandma. My friend wasn't frightened, because he is a rational person. So he thought the child was just joking or that maybe he only had an imaginary friend. He went back to the washing machine room, and the kid continued to talk, sitting in the corner. Nothing else happened for days, but like a couple of months later, my friend had to do the laundry again, and he was home alone with the little boy. So they went to the basement again, and the same thing happened. The child started talking in the same corner of the room and kept saying he was talking to his grandma. This time, my friend was a bit worried, mostly about the child being mad or something, so he told what happened to his parents. They immediately called the psychic, without telling her anything specific about where all this happened and who the child saw. As soon as the psychic came in the house, she went directly to the basement and stared at the same corner where the little boy used to sit and talk by himself. She said that she could feel something bad happen there, and she suggested to the parents to search the archives to see if something had happened in the house before they bought it. They found out that the previous owners were an old couple and that the man ended his wife. They found her body in a corner in the basement. Therefore, the boy, who had never met his grandmother, likely saw an old lady and immediately assumed she was her. I had a drunken chat with an ex, Chelsea, at a house party, and she told me she kept seeing a little boy ghost at the bottom of her bed every night or so. It never said anything, and she was too afraid to say it. I told her that she needs to ask it what it wants because if it were there to hurt her, it would have done it by now. A few weeks after that I had a late call from her, and she was crying. She'd asked it what it wanted, and it said, "I'm your brother, silly, tell mom it wasn't her fault." Supposedly when she asked her mom if she had a brother, her mom freaked out and asked her how she knew. Long story short, this girl Chelsea was a twin. Chelsea was born first, but there were complications with her twin, which resulted in the second baby not surviving. Chelsea said after she told her mom the ghost stopped appearing. It's a great story and all, and the emotion was real. But I've never seen one, and I'm the kind of lad that has to see something to believe it. I lived in my home with my husband and 3 kids for 2 decades. I had always seen, heard, and smelled things I chalked up to my imagination, headlights from passing cars, or anything I could think of to not be freaked out. One morning, my 3-year-old and I were sitting on my bed watching TV when I saw a dark figure of a man enter my bathroom out of the corner of my eye. As usual, I blamed my imagination and said nothing to my child. 10 to 15 minutes later, he was holding himself like he needed to pee, so I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm waiting for that man to come out of the bathroom so I can go." I felt like all the blood drained from my body. I calmly walked him into the bathroom and let him go, and then we left for Grandma and Grandpa's house. He's a grown man now and doesn't want to admit he believes in the supernatural, but when asked about that day, he remembers it all too well. Not only did I see and hear things and wake up in the middle of the night because something just wasn't right, but I also smelled men's body odor while alone at home and getting out of the shower. He was literally a dirty old man in every sense of the word. I was touched in very personal ways on several occasions, but the scariest thing was when everyone was gone to school and work. I felt someone get in bed with me more times than I can count and even felt the covers lift. I was never particularly inclined to believe, but when numerous events occur, one cannot deny their significance. We no longer reside there, and in reflection, I am uncertain how I managed to remain alone in that place. My hands are actually trembling as I type. Whether you believe me or not, I could carry on with all the events that transpired. I can look back on it now that I no longer live there, but I couldn't let myself think about all of it then. But one of the strangest things was only once did I actually feel like I was in danger, and that was in the middle of the night when I felt like someone was standing at the foot of our bed, but it was so dark because we were in a rural area that I just sat there staring, trying to see if it was real. Looking back, it all scares the hell out of me now. I've lived with a ghost for 5 years. Nothing cast shadows that turned and ran away, footsteps echoed down the hallway when I was alone, and one time I saw a girl at the far end of the hall brushing her hair in the mirror. I thought it was my little sister until I walked past her room and she was in there watching TV. Up until that moment I was still looking at that girl walking towards my room, and as soon as I looked at my sister and back, she was gone. Do I believe in ghosts? I didn't before I lived in that house. Hard to deny it now. When I was 14, the downstairs family room was where the computer sat. It was right next to the bathroom and stairwell, with the chair facing more toward the stairs and away from the front door. My 2 years younger sister was outside playing with the neighborhood kids, and I was on the computer. My mom had a streetlight policy where if the lights came on, you got your butt inside. Well, it was at dusk, and I'm wide awake listening to music. I hear the front door open and close behind me, squeaking, and turn around to see my sister taking off her shoes. I asked her what's up, and she replied, "I'm going upstairs," in a monotone manner. Now that I'm fully awake and coherent, I hear her footsteps going up the stairs, and I even hear her door upstairs opening and closing. Turn back around and keep noodling about on the internet. Not 5 minutes later, the front door squeals open again. Panicked, I turn around because mom and dad are also upstairs in their bedroom watching TV, which they normally do lying on their bed facing into the open hallway. No one should be coming into the house. In comes my sister. Does the exact same shoe taking off thing. I'm shocked because she just came in, and there is no other exit to the house. No way she got out upstairs. I stammer to her, asking, "Didn't you just come in?" And she said no, she hasn't been inside since she left. I firmly believe she did come in, and I think she is playing tricks on me. I told her I talked to it and heard it walk upstairs into her room. She goes pale. Our house had quite a lot of creepy stuff happen, so she believed me right away, and we rush upstairs to our parents' room. They had a clear view of the hallway. I asked my mom if she'd seen my sister come upstairs or heard the door open and close. She said no. I told my sister, "It went into your room." She slept in my room for 2 weeks after that. I'm indigenous, Ojibwe. We are told many things in our lives and to expect to see many things in our lives. I thought, okay, but not me/us, community. Fast forward, we now see our men 5 days in our dreams or in their shadow form before death, and 4 days for our women or shadow form before death. Well, I've now seen 8+ people pass, and it hasn't been inaccurate. This was the first time I fully believed it. Without doubt. It was because I always saw shadow people when I saw my classmate/community member depart, and I felt we anticipated their departure. Anyway, in one instance, I felt wide awake, not dreaming or even sleeping. I sat up in bed and saw them. I asked them why 2 of them were there. One was standing behind the chair, and the other was sitting on it. My grandfather P.S. 2 days later. But the figure in the chair was holding a small object of light on their lap. The next day, her family members found my classmate deceased while 6 months pregnant. I had no explanation of what happened or what I saw. But it was real, I was awake. Additionally, 6 other classmates, all Ojibwe, also told me they saw the exact thing I described. My older brother died on June 1st. About 2 months before his death, I started seeing a shadow person. My older brother died on June 1st. About 2 months before his death, I started seeing a shadow person walking from the kitchen to the bathroom. I've always been sensitive to the paranormal, but my boyfriend has never experienced anything. I never said anything to him about it, and I'm not sure he believed me when I told him about the things I would see and hear. My purse was also thrown off of my dresser and landed on the foot of my bed. There are 5 feet between them. One day I'm sitting on the couch, and my boyfriend looks at me and says, "I've been seeing a person-like shadow walking from the kitchen to the bathroom, but it's only in my periphery, and when I try to focus on it, it just disappears." I just saw one behind you. For him to see something I've been seeing, it was actually a relief. About 2 weeks before my brother died, I also had a friend tell me they saw the same thing while at my house. This home was built in the early 1930s, but there has never been any activity. A few days before my brother's death, I was standing in the kitchen. I could feel someone with me, but it was almost comforting. A voice said my name near my right ear. The voice was male and almost a whisper. It startled me, so I jumped and said, "I hate it when you do that." After his death, there were no more experiences. I've always had a very deep connection to my brother. He caused an accident when I was 14 that claimed the life of a young lady. I was over 1,000 miles away, but I just knew. It was late at night, and I was hysterical. I started calling friends and family and asking them not to let him do whatever it was I was feeling. That next morning, I got one of the worst calls I've ever had. He had ended a woman in the accident and wasn't expected to live. How did I know? Another time, I dreamed of him lost in a forest, struggling to find his way out. The next day I started calling hospitals and police stations until I finally found him. He had lain on the floor in the bathroom for 3 days after a night of partying. He had internal bleeding. Blood had settled in one of his kidneys. He had to be on dialysis. Again, how did I know? But I always knew when something was really wrong. I had been thinking about my brother a lot in the 2 months before his death. At this point, we were 6 years estranged because of his lifestyle. I knew something was wrong, but what was the shadow about? I just don't understand seeing this thing weeks before he died and then everything just stopping after his death. Was it a warning? Were they trying to tell me something, and I just wasn't listening? Any thoughts on the subject are welcome. I grew up having some pretty intense encounters, and it's what kicked off my passion for paranormal investigating and researching psychic gifts, which is how I learned I was a medium. My first ever experience that I can remember happened when I was 4 to 5 years old. My dad's best friend had passed away shortly after I was born due to an aneurysm. I was sitting on the couch watching TV and eating pretzel sticks when I saw him walk through the door. He waved at me, I waved at him, scared, and then ran to go get my dad because I didn't know who this guy was. My dad came around the corner and froze. He just kind of stared, then told me to go to my room. I waited on the stairs instead because I didn't know what was going on and was a wee tiny bit nosy. I started minding my own business really quick, though, when my dad said, "You're dead," and BFF replied, "Yep, but not done." My dad wasn't ready to tell me what happened after they stepped outside until just recently, though. He said that BFF showed up to show him a gas leak that was happening in the yard from a pipe that had been damaged during the yard resurfacing project that had just recently taken place. BFF worked on gas and plumbing lines for a living in life. BFF left after he showed the gas leak, and the last thing he said to my dad was, "Don't die stupid," which has become the family motto. Paranormal encounter. I'm 21 now, but when I was about 10 or 11, something happened that I've only told a handful of people about because it sounds downright crazy. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor next to my grandparents' bed. Right as I was falling asleep, I suddenly heard an intense roaring sound, like a bunch of cars racing at full speed, even though the house was silent and no one else heard it. The noise stopped abruptly, and the next second I felt invisible arms wrap around me tightly from behind. I panicked, jumped onto my grandparents' bed screaming, and pushed my head underneath the blanket. A few seconds later, 3 or 4 tall figures appeared in the room. They looked like men wearing old plague doctor masks, the ones with the long beaks, but without the beaks, and dark robes, holding thick brown leathery books. They were staring down at me or the books and chanting something I couldn't understand. Only I could see and hear them. My grandparents couldn't see the figures, but they knew something was seriously wrong because I was hysterical. While I was under the blanket, something ripped it completely off the bed and threw it to the floor. My grandpa started yelling, "Get these things out of my house," were his exact words. Then the bathroom faucet kept turning itself on full blast every time my grandfather tried to shut it off. After the masked figures finally vanished, I started seeing movement everywhere, spiders swinging from the ceiling, bugs crawling on the walls, and shadowy outlines of beings just standing motionless in the corners. I could tell they were there even though I couldn't see them clearly. When everything finally stopped, there was a strange burned mark left on the wall that hadn't been there before. We were a completely ordinary family, no occult stuff, no drugs, nothing that could explain it. I've never had any other hallucinations or mental health issues. Most people I've told think I dreamed it or made it up, but my grandparents were there and saw how terrified I was and the things that happened in the room that night. It felt like a door to something else opened just for me, and it took away my sense of safety as a kid. I still don't know what it was, but I know it was real. Hoping for some clarity on this or some sort of explanation. About a couple of years into my new home, I was mowing the lawn. It was a bright day, and I was listening to music on my headphones. I leaned over to prime the lawnmower, and suddenly I looked up for a fraction of a second and saw a solid figure of a man dressed in an old-style plaid shirt and brown slacks just about 15 feet away from me. He was facing me, looking at me. I did a double take, and he was gone. I just thought I was tired and seeing things, but it took me a while to realize that it couldn't have just been my imagination. It was a man literally standing there, completely solid. I later found out the previous owner had died about 15 years prior, and he was an older man, just kind of like the guy I saw. He was dressed in sort of 70s style clothes, from what I could see. It took me a while to get that to sink in, but it didn't scare me. I still go out and mow outside. Has anyone else ever had an undeniable experience? I had a really crazy/hilarious encounter as a kid that I cannot for the life of me find an explanation for. It's honestly really silly, but at the time it was extremely terrifying. I understand if you don't believe me. When I was 8/9, my parents took me over to visit with a friend of theirs who had a daughter that was a few years younger than me. She had an ungodly amount of toys, including a separate playroom. As soon as our parents entered her father's room, to smoke weed, an unsettling atmosphere permeated the entire house. She stayed upstairs to play in her room while I looked around, but after a few minutes checking out the playroom, I couldn't stand the feeling and joined her. We played for a good while, and she randomly told me that sometimes at night she hears something under her bed, and if she looks, she always sees red eyes staring back at her. I remember not really knowing what to say, so we went back to our Barbies. There were 2 incidents that occurred, and both were when we were in different rooms. She had gone downstairs to grab a toy from the playroom, and on the way back up the stairs, somehow, she had tripped and fallen on her hands and knees. I heard her yelp and ran to find her sliding backwards down the carpeted stairs. I didn't really consider it to be paranormal at the time, but thinking back now, how is a 50 to 60 pound kid going to slide that fast down carpeted stairs? At most she would have slid a few steps, right? Not all the way down with her arms outstretched. I didn't find out until after we left, but her grandfather, apparently a mean person, had had a heart attack and died on those stairs. The second incident happened after I went to use the bathroom. She started yelling, and I ran out again to find her holding onto her hula hoop with what looked like something pulling on the other end of it. I don't know where I got the courage because I'm a little wimp when it comes to paranormal stuff, but I remember feeling outraged. I stepped forward and grabbed her end to help her pull it away, but whatever it was had no intention of giving it back. I yelled, "Let go!" And it did. My parents took me home right after because I was so freaked out, and I've never gone back. I've felt so sorry for the little girl ever since. I don't know what ended up happening to them. The whole thing sounds far too ridiculous for me to have ever told anyone besides my mom, but that was such undeniable proof that something exists and it likes to mess with people. There is no plausible explanation for the last incident. A toy cannot simply become stuck in midair without any support. I was just thinking it over again today and decided to share and see what you guys think, or maybe if anyone else had an experience like this where you can't explain away something that, by all rights, should not have ever happened. Thanks for listening to all of this, if you did. I hope you're having a good, or at least decent, day. Sometime in high school I was walking my dog pretty late at night when my parents had gone away for a few days. Lived in a rural town, and it was November or December, so it was naturally dead this time of year, with slight snowfall and totally silent. Anyway, my house was sort of at the bottom of a pretty long and relatively straight road, which you could see up for about a quarter mile. I was heading back down the hill, about 2 blocks from my house, when my dog turned around and totally froze. I thought he saw a deer or another animal, so I grabbed a firm grip, thinking he might try and bolt, but he continued to stand there with one paw slightly lifted off the sidewalk, staring up the street. There was nothing in sight whatsoever, so I tried to pull him back towards the house, being kind of freaked out. He wouldn't budge at all and continued to stay like that for about 20 seconds, and then out of nowhere, within a millisecond, he turned around and bolted for the house, away from whatever he was seeing. It freaked me out, and I sprinted right behind him, not realizing I dropped my phone in the snow while running. Went back with a flashlight and got it, but man, it was weird. He was definitely still a little spooked when we got inside. Whatever he saw, he did not like, and it definitely freaked me out at the time. What my mother said in the weeks leading up to her death scared us all. A few years ago, my mother died after a long battle with cancer. In her last few weeks, she was bedridden at home at one point and on heavy pain medication. The whole family took turns to help and spend time with her, and what she told us towards the end gave us all a shock. She kept having a scared reaction to something. She'd jump and say, "Oh God," or she'd swear as if something had made her jump. She didn't say anything at first, but then, after a week or two, blurted out something one day that gave us all the creeps. I wish he'd stop scaring me. Tell him to go away. She was annoyed at something, or someone, to be exact. Confused, we asked her what the problem was, and she told us. Apparently, in her last few weeks, she kept seeing her deceased partner walking around the house. He'd walk down the hallway or past her bedroom door, or sometimes he'd be sitting in her room, and every time it had happened she'd jump with fright, obviously not expecting to see him there. She was more annoyed than scared. She'd see him several times a day, just going about his business as if he'd never left. Usually her reaction would be, "Oh, for God's sake, go away." Not because she didn't want to see him, but because it kept making her jump. Our first thought was that it was something to do with the pain medication she was receiving, but the nurse assured us that it wouldn't cause hallucinations or visions. It scared the bloody crap out of us, I know that much. She went into a hospice a few weeks later, and the visions stopped. Weird, huh? We still don't even talk about it, that's how creeped out we all are. Too stubborn to believe anything paranormal, but what happened that night was impossible to deny. My brother and I both shared a room when we were around 10 years old. My bed being on one side of the room and his bed being on the opposite side. It was really dark, and I was staring up at my ceiling, waiting for that drowsy feeling to creep in. I remember, clear as ducking day, my bed bouncing 3 times. It felt as if someone was underneath my bed, kicking the mattress from below the frame. It was brief and violent, only 3 times. I got up immediately and looked at my little brother, whose eyes were locked on what was underneath my bed. He told me there was something there, and when I went to check, it was just our basketball. The ball was bouncing as if it had just been dropped 2 seconds prior to me checking under my bed. There is simply no logical explanation as to what happened and how. When I'm alone with my thoughts, I think about it and genuinely become stressed. I'm 24 now, and I called him recently to see if it was a fake memory, but no, he confirmed it actually happened, and he had no possible explanations. So I grew up next door to a nice Polish couple, Ted and Josie. For 19 years our family loved them, and we considered them like our grandparents. One day Ted passed away, and then Josie happened to pass 6 months after him. About 4 days passed by, it was Friday night, and I'm sleeping in my bedroom with my back toward the door, and I suddenly wake up. I looked at my alarm clock, and it was exactly 1 a.m. As I tried to go back to sleep, I heard the wooden floor from my room creak. I then felt the bed sink in a bit as if someone had sat on it behind me. I thought it might be one of my sisters coming to bug me about her night out, and I wasn't in the mood to entertain any gossip, so I pretended to be asleep. A few seconds go by, and she gets up and leaves. The next day I had forgotten all about it, and I didn't even mention it to my sisters if any one of them had come to my room. Well, that night the exact same thing occurred. I fell asleep at around 10:30 p, and by 1:00 a I was awake again for no apparent reason. Again I felt someone walk in and sit on the edge of my bed. Now I'm kind of scared but stood motionless pretending to be asleep again, facing away from the door, and was not going to turn around unless I was approached or spoken to. Again I felt this person get up from the bed and leave after a few seconds. I thought for sure I'd speak to my mom and siblings about this the next morning and went back to sleep. Now it's Sunday. I remembered, and so I asked my sisters in front of my mom if any of them had walked in my room at night and sat in my bed 2 nights in a row for whatever reason. All 3 of them laughed at me and said no. They accused me of being crazy. But I insisted, and then my mom turned around and said, "What if it's Josie's ghost?" I said, "What? No way." She then tells me that sometimes spirits need a candle lit in their honor so that they can follow the light to their final resting place. She said maybe since her death nobody from her direct family had lit a candle for her during her funeral. I thought it was a weird thing, but I felt honored, if true, that she had come to me since we were a family of 6. I remember thinking, if she comes again tonight, I'll turn around and face her. Why not? Why would I be afraid of her since she was nothing but pure love while she was alive? She clearly must not be visiting me to hurt me or scare me. I got bold and told myself I would and went about my day. I forgot all about it at night and went to sleep early since I had school the next morning. Well, I awoke again that night at exactly 1:00 a. I remembered what my mom had said, and I thought to myself, Josie. So I turned around and faced my door. I didn't have a physical door, I just had a curtain hanging from a rod. Well, I heard a chair outside my room move, and I saw the curtain starting to move like a breeze was swaying it, and I panicked. I freaked out. I turned toward the wall and covered myself with the blanket up over my ear. Here it was, the real thing, and I couldn't face her. It was a surreal feeling. The room got very cold this time. I got stiff and then started shaking and crying. Josie sat on my bed and placed her cold hand on my shoulder. I then heard a faint there. It was her voice. I stood there with my jaw locked. It seemed like it lasted a lot longer than in the previous nights, but after a while she finally gets up and walks out. That's it. The room got warm again, but I remained clutched to my cover as I soaked the pillow in tears. I was not going to turn around or get up for the rest of the night, I thought. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I remained awake and in shock the entire night. After what seemed like an eternity, 4 a.m. rolls around, and I hear my dad's alarm clock go off. He got up pretty early for work. As soon as he turned on the lights, I got up and ran to him to tell him what had happened to me that night. He saw how shook I was with red eyes from crying, and since I've never been up at 4 a.m. my entire life, he believed me right away and told me not to worry. He was going to have my mom turn on a candle in my room for her while I was at school. I can't believe I went to school that day since I hadn't slept. Later on that afternoon when I got back, Mom told me she had lit a candle in my room, and that was it. I never woke up at 1 a.m. again, so I'm guessing she was able to follow the light and rest in peace. After that experience, I was left in awe, and I definitely believe in ghosts. I was 9 months pregnant with my first child and super uncomfortable. Decided to sleep on the couch instead of our bed for some back support. Our dog, who hits a bell at the back door to go out, came and lay on my feet. Around 2 a.m., the back door doggy bell starts ringing violently. The dog growls beside me, and we look at each other like, WTF? No one was at the door hitting the bell, and it was the kind of reindeer bell string where you'd have to shake the sliding glass door back and forth really hard to get it to even make a small sound on its own. It made noise mostly just when the dog batted it with his paws or if you were to wave it around like a flag. I tried to find a reason. But there was no heat on, no AC vent or fan around, and no other people or animals in the house. I was terrified. I called the police, who walked my house inside and out and also found nothing. To this day it is the single most unexplainable thing I've experienced and the closest thing to a ghost I know of. I don't believe in the paranormal, but I can't explain this. About 8 years ago I rented a house in Aurora, Colorado. It was my wife, my 2 sons, and myself. The oldest was 12 at the time, and the youngest was 6. I worked at home. My wife worked in an office at the time, and the youngest wasn't in school yet. This was about 12 in the afternoon. Nothing dark or spooky. Bright, sunny day in Colorado. The bedrooms were mostly upstairs, and we had a full basement with a living area, laundry room, and a couple of spare bedrooms. The youngest one would play downstairs often, as I was in meetings a lot during the day. One day out of the blue I was answering some emails, and I heard what I can only describe as a blood-curdling scream. Sheer terror. I ran downstairs to check on my youngest, as it was very unusual. I assumed he was seriously hurt. When I ran down the stairs into the basement, the stairs down to the basement were carpeted and nice. Nothing spooky looking at all, as the basement essentially serves as a secondary home, outside of lacking a kitchen. When I got downstairs, I saw my 6-year-old running at me. I checked him for any injuries, and he seemed fine. I asked him what happened, and he said this exactly. The man is scary. He's a scary man. The basement has no walkout, you have to come into the house to access it. I brushed it off immediately as a kid being imaginative. Then I heard stomping feet going up the stairs. Mind you, I was only about 5 feet away and could literally feel the steps as if someone was almost jumping and stomping with each step. The sound followed the stairs upwards as well. If I had not seen it. Mind you, there's nobody in the house besides us, and we didn't have any neighbors or guests anywhere close to us. My youngest son is 15 now and doesn't remember it. It's the only time I've ever experienced something that truly made me second guess my position regarding the afterlife/supernatural occurrences. To this day it gives me chills thinking about it. It's the only thing in life I have ever experienced I truly can't explain. I would love to think it wasn't a hallucination, trick, etc. Something ran up my stairs after I ran down to check on my son. The weirdest part for me is that the running up the stairs was as soon as my son reached me and I started checking on him to see if he hurt himself, and it was very, very violent sounding. It sounded like someone was quickly stomping up the stairs. My friends and I would gather in cemeteries after dark to seek out ghosts, but I never truly believed in their existence. I merely found the experience to be entertaining and eerie. I had multiple interesting moments, the kind of thing my friend viewed as proof but just wasn't enough for me. They were suspicious moments that I didn't have an explanation for, but I just wasn't on board. And then, one night, my friend urged me to look at something, and I observed a woman gliding for approximately 10 seconds. She was a sort of beige color, made no contact with the ground, and passed through several headstones. Then she just disappeared. Had I seen this alone, I would have probably assumed I hallucinated it. I have no other explanations for this experience. And it scared the living hell out of me too. I backed away quickly and tripped over a headstone, knocking me on my back. I remain hesitant in my belief. I'm not sure what ghosts are, if they're conscious or just residual energy. I haven't necessarily opened myself up to other notions of an afterlife or the paranormal. But there is something. And I'm very interested in figuring that stuff out. How saying I don't believe in ghosts made me a believer. When I moved out of home, I moved into an old creepy house. The heating didn't work, the windows wouldn't close properly, and the cupboards were full of these elaborate handmade shelves. The house had doors leading to rooms that connected to other rooms in a confusing manner. Overall, it lacked a normal layout. But the creepiest room was the laundry. It was a large square room with white tiles with a drain in the middle. Just think of a location inspired by Saw. When you walked into this room, it had 3 steps down to the floor. On the right was a sink and 2 doors, one for a shower and the other for the toilet. Straight ahead was the door to the garage. On the left side, next to the door, was the cupboard under the stairs. This cupboard was freezing cold, but it was completely cement and brick, with no draft and no gaps, just pitch black darkness. I lived with 3 other people, but our schedules were all mixed, so Tuesdays were my nights alone. I started to notice things like glass would break in the kitchen, but I'd walk in and nothing was broken. I'd walk outside to get the mail and close the door behind me with my dog inside and come back to her on the front step. Then the nightmares, night after night I'd have terrifying nightmares of someone knocking on my door and getting up to answer it to no one there. All of which I'd just shake off as an idle mind. Then one night I was home and watching TV, and suddenly I heard a loud rattling. I jumped to my feet and walked to the laundry door, where I could hear the rattling on the other side. Possibly someone trying to get through the locked garage door, I thought. I opened the door, and the garage door handle was still. But the one in the cupboard wasn't. The entire door was shaking like someone was inside the cupboard violently trying to get out. I froze for just a minute. Grabbed my dog and left the house until someone agreed to come over. I had a friend come over and walk inside. I sat on a stool well over a meter away from the wall. My friend sat at the table. "Maybe you have ghosts," she said. I just want to add I was raised religious and told there's no such thing for 18 years of my life. In my head there had to be a logical explanation, and my fears were surely irrational. "There's no such thing as ghosts," I scoffed. Without another second, pressure on my shoulder pushed me off the stool and slammed me onto the wall in one quick motion. To clarify, I didn't fall off the stool. If I did, I would have hit my head on the wall. My entire body slammed into the wall. I stood and looked at my friend, and she looked at me. We said no words, and I grabbed my keys and my dog, and we got dinner. Nothing was ever said about it, about how I was thrown across the room. I moved out shortly after, but I will never say ghosts don't exist again. What I believe to be a paranormal encounter. When I was in Ethiopia on a trip, I was in a pretty small city with only about 50,000 people. So I'm at my aunt's house, and they have a window, and 3 feet from the window, there is a fence. This is nighttime, so obviously there are no lights besides one small light that was just enough to see around. As I go to cover the curtain on the window, I see what appears to be a kid facing away from me on the other side of the fence, and I tell my sister. I say, "Please say that's our niece," and she is literally right there. So at this point, I'm thinking an intruder is on our property or someone came from our cousin's house. My sister looks out and says there is nothing there, and it's just gone. My uncle goes outside with an extremely powerful flashlight and searches the entire area. Nobody believed me and thought I was lying, but I really saw a young child standing in complete darkness 5 feet from me. Maybe it was a ghost, maybe it was an intruder, I'll never know. My friend's girlfriend claims to be able to see ghosts. I'm the only one not buying it. My friend brought a girl to my boyfriend's place whom we understood was his potential girlfriend. There were 5 of us talking, and somehow the conversation led to her mentioning that there is a female ghost in my boyfriend's room. From then on that was all we talked about. I already knew my boyfriend believed in ghosts, though he's never seen one, but it seemed like all 4 of them genuinely believed in ghosts, and I was the only one skeptical about it. I didn't argue or belittle her or anything like that. I played along, asked questions, and mostly responded with I see. I'm pretty sure I've told my boyfriend before that I don't believe in ghosts, so at least one person knew I thought it was ridiculous. It's possible that he forgot about it, but if he had to guess, he would say I don't. She described the appearance and nature of the ghost and shared her previous experiences related to her ability. I don't know what to say. I am a little bit disappointed that my boyfriend and our friends still believe in ghosts in this day and age, yet at the same time she described it in such detail that I don't understand what she would benefit from lying about such a thing. I didn't really mind listening to her talk about ghosts, though. I even thought it was pretty interesting. If anything, I was trying to figure out how the girl's mind works. I have no ill feelings towards the girl. I thought she was unique, or at least not an empty shell like my friend's previous girlfriend. Long story short, right now I'm a bit bothered by how I am unsure of my disbelief in ghosts. That night I went home to Google some scientific explanations for ghost sightings, and none came close to how she describes her experiences. There must be something to explain her sightings other than simply dismissing them as she's lying. So what do you think, guys? Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe it when someone claims to be able to see ghosts? Is there a scientific or psychological explanation for this? Should I just continue to play along the next time I see her and say nothing to argue? I'm leaning towards this one. I never believed in the paranormal until my trip to France 3 years ago. I was about 15 when this happened and had always been a skeptic on the paranormal, but since then I have been a 100% believer in the paranormal. I and my family tend to rent houses in the south of France for vacations, and that's what we did too for that year's summer break. I saw it myself on the website. It looked really gorgeous, you know, an old French house in a small village. The people going were me, my brother, my parents, and my grandparents. As we arrive at the house, we realize that it must have been some old religious house before becoming an actual home. We were told it was built somewhere in the 17 to 1800s, not sure which, and placed next to the old church, like right up against it. As soon as we enter, I get this very eerie and heavy feeling. The vibes felt completely disconnected from the rest of the town, but obviously I didn't say anything. Why would I? The house consisted of 3 floors, but we were told the 3rd floor was private and closed off. Which was a bit weird, but whatever. There were 4 rooms, so I got my own room. And as much as I hate to admit it, I was terrified of sleeping alone in that room. I asked my brother if he could sleep in the other bed, but obviously he said no, like any big brother would. So my mom ended up sleeping in there. However, she would go back to her own room once I was asleep. The actual experience happened on, I believe, the 3rd day. My mom had slept in the spare bed in my room, and I in the bed I did the other days. My bed was placed in a little nook with a kind of curtain I had closed so it felt more cozy. I fell asleep but ended up waking in the middle of the night. I'm usually a very heavy sleeper and never wake at night. As soon as I wake, I hear these footsteps. It sounds like bare feet running across the woven carpet in my room. They started at the foot of my bed and ran out the door into the hall, where they disappeared. At this time I believed it was my mom who had gone back to her bedroom, so I quickly got up and walked to the other end of the hall where my mom would have slept. My grandparents, who slept in the room across from me, were dead asleep, and so was my brother. And as I walk into my parents' bedroom, I realized that so is my mom. No one had been awake. My mom had left the room hours ago. The morning after, I ask everyone, and they all deny this happening, at least for now. I was spooked for the rest of the trip but did not experience this again. However, the day we had to leave and I was packing, I looked at my nightstand. I had brought a little angel figurine made of rose quartz for protection, but now the figurine was broken, almost like it was sliced down the middle. Months later, I talked to my mom, who tells me that she has been terrified of the house as well and has felt the same weird energy, as has my brother. She even mentioned that when she had slept in my room, she had woken to the feeling of someone watching her, just like I had. To this day I get goosebumps thinking about everything that happened. I think something in that house disliked us staying there, and based on the broken crystal, I do not think it was something nice. In the early 90s, when I was about 20 or 21 years old, I messed with a Ouija board at a friend's house. He said he had a ghost in his room named Gracie. She liked to pull the curtains down and knock over the fan. Of course, I laughed and told him he was a fool, lol. So he said, "Let's get the Ouija board out. Whatever, I'll play along with your ridiculousness." So he asked a few questions, and it went around the board. I'm like, whatever, dude. Then he asked Gracie to prove to me that she was real. The thing went around a little bit, then just stopped. A second later, I felt a hand grab my leg, and I could literally see the handprint in my pants, but there was no hand there. I flew out of that house and never went back inside. We've been best friends for 37 years, and he lived in that house for 10 years after that, and I never went back in that house. I'm really scared to tell this one. So, I am aware that I can see and speak to ghosts, and I have been able to for some time now. Things like this don't typically scare me. I mean, I play horror games for fun, but I have a story that kind of worries me. One time, my two brothers and I were playing a game outside in the dark. We were basically playing a horror game in real life. While we were playing, we heard a scratching sound come from the garage. I wasn't distressed because we were at our farm, and strange sounds are normal there. But then we heard it again and got curious. So we went to the garage, and we just hung around there. Then I heard something say leave, and I asked why, thinking my brothers said it. They both looked confused. I then realized that they didn't say that, and that since we didn't, we might be in danger, but I also realized that since they didn't know what I was talking about, only I heard it. I knew we had to leave, so I made up a fake story about how I saw a creature in the garage. There wasn't. We went inside. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? I don't believe in ghosts, but I've never believed in ghosts. Not as a child, not as an adult, and certainly not now. I'm an atheist through and through, the kind who leans not on faith, but on physics, patterns, and probabilities. The kind who, when presented with mystery, reaches first for evidence. Even now, I am the type of individual who does not merely believe in logic, I pursue it, insist upon it, and base my sense of tranquility upon it. If something can't be explained, I don't fear it. I dissect it. Examine it under every hypothesis I can construct. And I've lived in plenty of houses where deaths had occurred. There was even a guest house that was openly rumored to be haunted. People claimed to have seen things, heard whispers, and felt presences. But I slept like a rock, 2 floors above the world, all alone, with not even a creak to report. But there's one story, one house, that refuses to be explained, no matter how many times I've turned it over under the microscope of reason. And even now, with all my scientific thinking and rational lens, I still haven't found a single explanation that fits. It happened about 10 years ago, when I was still married. My husband and I had rented a small, older home nestled in the chaos of a dense market neighborhood, right in the heart of bustling Mumbai. It was nothing remarkable, 1 bedroom, a cramped drawing room, and just enough space for the 2 of us and our 2-year-old son. Homes just 10 feet across are common there, stacked in rows like bricks in a hive, each life a whisper away from the next. Despite its location in the middle of a heavily populated area, the house always felt dark. We replaced tube lights and tried every fitting and fixture, but the bedroom remained unlit, no matter what we did. Eventually, we gave up and adjusted to the dimness. It seemed harmless enough. Until it didn't. One morning in the first week, our neighbor, a very old woman whose front door faced ours, barely 10 feet across, approached me. She asked if I could return her padlock. Confused, I told her I hadn't borrowed anything. She looked puzzled and explained that a girl in a black dress had come out of my house and asked to borrow it. She was certain, absolutely certain, that the girl had exited my door. I asked every cousin and family member who might have dropped by. None of them had taken a lock. None had visited that day. In fact, that exact day, my husband and I had locked the house and gone out shopping together. We weren't even home. I tried to explain that to her, gently suggesting maybe she had mistaken the house. But she remained adamant, visibly frustrated. She stopped speaking to me after that. I dismissed it. An elderly woman, maybe some confusion. Maybe a prank. I chose logic, as I always do. But the house didn't seem to agree. A few days later, one of my cousins came to stay the night. She slept in the drawing room while her 3-year-old son stayed with his grandparents, who lived a few lanes away. The next morning, he came to wake her mother up, my cousin, early in the morning, cheerful, until he stepped inside. He froze. Suddenly shivering with fear. Then, without saying anything, he covered his eyes with his hands and refused to lower them, necessitating that he be carried out of the house. Only after they'd left and walked far from my house did he tell my cousin, there was a burnt lady sitting in the corner and staring at all of us. At the time, I didn't know this. My cousin kept it from me, afraid I'd be scared. But the story came out later, and by then, it wasn't the only one. My own son, 2 years old then, would often talk to someone in the bedroom. Always the same corner, behind the door, where the darkness lingered thickest. He'd offer his blanket. Sit and mumble soft words. The behavior wasn't abnormal for a toddler, not by itself. I rationalized it and did not think much about it. Children have imaginary friends. The mind invents when it's lonely, or curious, or tired. These were ordinary, explainable behaviors. I clung to that. Then came the conversation that shifted the ground beneath my certainty. We were packing to leave the house. A neighbor, someone I had never spoken to before, struck up a casual conversation while I sat outside waiting for the movers. She chatted about if I needed something and where I am moving and all, again, Pretty common in India, and she mentioned, without prompting, that I often wore black. Just like the girl who had lived there before. Just like the girl who had died there. Burned by her boyfriend in a hotel room. Rescued. But she didn't survive. She died in the house, this house. I asked around. Quietly. I knew this area well, our extended family had been living there for decades. And the story checked out. The girl who died was the younger sister of one of my school classmates. That was the moment I stopped trying to explain the experience away. Because I had lived in other places where death had occurred. Nothing ever felt wrong. I once spent months alone in a supposedly haunted guest house, nothing. No chills, no whispers, no unseen eyes. Just empty rooms and silence. But this house. It wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by weight. A kind of thick emotional residue that logic couldn't dissolve. Everyone felt it, especially the children, the ones untrained in denial. The old woman, too, sharp and specific in her memory of a girl in black. What was that? Not a spirit, perhaps. But not nothing. The scientist in me still looks for answers. Faulty wiring? Subsonic frequencies? Mold? Carbon monoxide? Psychological transference? Maybe. But nothing about the house screamed any of those things. No illnesses. No headaches. No hallucinations. Just an oppressive quiet, a sense of being watched. A corner that refused to be just a corner. It didn't break my skepticism. But it did something deeper. It made me accept that not every question has an answer yet. That science isn't about being certain, it's about being willing to ask more. And maybe some places remember. Maybe pain leaves fingerprints. And maybe, even if we can't explain it, some truths still breathe in the places where logic goes quiet. I'm glad I left that house. But I'll never forget it. Because it never quite let me go. I don't believe in ghosts, but this seems like one. Greece, summer 2008. I am 16 years old. My father rented me a room so I could find some peace in a luxury club near Athens. One night, I hear a woman screaming in anger, knocking on the wall near my bed. I'm going to knock at the door, they won't let me in. Then, I go back to my room again. Silence. Good, I go back to bed. The very next day, I get up quite early, the day goes by, and it is good. But at nightfall, the same story happens again. This time, I respond by hitting on the wall. At my bedroom's balcony, I go out and try to see what is happening on the other side, but the light is off. I wonder if it's not a couple making fierce love, but there's no doubt, what I hear at that moment are clearly annoyed, angry cries. I'm going to knock again, no one answers me. I go to the reception to finally complain about the noise, although I don't like it. Maybe it could be a woman who has been hurt by a violent husband. But the staff tells me that the room next to mine is free and therefore totally empty. I'm going back to bed, this story gives me chills. Eventually, a couple moves into the cursed bedroom. I am rather reassured, but it does not last. When I go to the swimming pool, I see them at the reception complaining that their bathroom is disgusting and the room is very noisy, which is surprising because I did not hear anything weird. I'm starting to have nightmares. I dream of a woman hanging in a laundromat. The image disturbs me a lot. The staff probably offered another room to the couple who left. I even heard some knock-knock sounds on the wall. When I secretly smoked on the balcony, the light turned on by itself. I also asked to change rooms. This time it was in a building facing the one where I slept for a few nights. I was really obsessed with this cursed room. One night, the person who now occupied the room waved to me, but I was in the dark. Maybe she was waving at someone else? But the screaming came back. The club has closed, forever, and I have never experienced a similar situation again. This is all pure coincidence. There must be an explanation. Maybe there was a living person who secretly lived in the room this whole time. Dead or alive, it does not seem okay. I didn't believe in the paranormal until I was in the 3rd grade at the time, and to be honest, I've never actually believed in paranormal activity or anything like that. All of my friends would always question whether or not I believe in ghosts, or anything paranormal for that matter, because I've always been afraid of everything, and whenever they asked me these questions, I always gave them the same response, no. But ever since that rainy afternoon in April of 2015, my answer had always been a faint whisper of the word yes. I swear to God that everything I am about to tell you is 100% true. It was the weekend, probably a Saturday, and it was pouring like crazy outside. The duck pond down the street actually flooded, and the water reached my house and way beyond that. That's how badly it was raining. As much as I wanted to go jump around in the puddles the rain created, there was so much water and I was so small, it would have swept me away. So I stayed inside with my little sister, who was 5 years old at the time, and we watched movies on the TV upstairs. All is going well, we're laughing and enjoying the movie when suddenly, it begins to rewind on its own. My little sister was getting a little weirded out, and to be honest, so was I. I picked up the remote and paused the movie. When I unpaused it, it began to play like normal. I didn't think much of it and just proceeded to watch the movie with my sister. A few minutes passed, and I had already entirely forgotten about how freaked out I was earlier. Suddenly, the whole screen went black. I knew at this point my sister was scared, and honestly, so was I. I told her that there was nothing to be scared of and that the signal was probably just really bad due to the terrible weather. I reached out for the remote to try and turn the TV back on, and right as my hand was about an inch away from the remote, it turned on again and just resumed playing like normal. My little sister at this point was very scared and told me she was going to go downstairs to get some snacks, but in reality, I knew she was just scared and didn't want to be upstairs after what had just happened. When she ran down the steps, I felt horrible. She was my little sister, and I felt I had to protect her because she was so little, and I had convinced myself that I didn't do a good job at all, considering how scared she was. As I sat on the couch sulking, I heard footsteps running quickly back up the stairs. At the time, that had to have been the scariest sound I had ever heard. I thought to myself, there is no way in hell that she made popcorn and poured 2 bowls full of M&M's candies in under 5 seconds. I slowly turned my head around as slowly as possible to try to avoid seeing whatever it was that I had heard running up the stairs with the speed of a bullet, and there it was. I know that this description is going to sound so cliché, but please, for once, after all these years, I need somebody to believe me. Over our wooden banister, I saw half of a face. It belonged to a little girl. She was hiding the lower half of her face and the rest of her body behind a wall a little over 3 feet high that was connected to the banister. Her face was completely pale, her hair was black, and her eyes were ocean blue. Those eyes are forever locked into my memory, and to this day, I can never unsee what I saw that day. Her hair and face were completely soaked. She looked as if she had been outside in the rain for hours. We locked eyes for at least over 30 seconds, and the entire time, I did not blink nor breathe. Something about those eyes though, once I caught a glimpse, I couldn't look away. Pure terror fell over my whole body, and I kept trying to tell myself to move, but suddenly, I became completely paralyzed. I told myself to scream, and I opened my mouth, and I continued to look into her eyes. I felt like my body wasn't my own anymore. Suddenly my mouth closed, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't open it again. You might think that a 30-second stare is nothing, but when you're in a situation like mine, it feels like an entire lifetime passes, and you're completely helpless, speechless, and breathless through all of it. After what felt like forever, I broke the trance that I was in by blinking, and when I opened my eyes again, she was gone. I could finally move and breathe and talk again. I then heard footsteps coming up the stairs and was terrified for my life that I would see that same little girl again. You have no idea how happy I was to see my little sister walking up the steps. When she saw me, I was just as pale as the girl I had just seen on the stairs. My sister ran straight to me, dropping our snacks on the ground, and asking me what had happened. I knew she was scared after seeing my pale face and the lifelessness in my eyes, but I didn't want to scare her even more, so I didn't tell her anything for a few years. I'm in the 7th grade now, and ever since then, I've experienced many paranormal events, but they were not nearly as terrifying as what I had experienced on that day. That was my first paranormal experience, and I can tell you all now, it's not my last. Thank you all for listening. I hope there are some people out there that will believe me. I've never believed in the paranormal until today. So I woke up 30 minutes earlier than I was supposed to this morning. I didn't have my phone with me at the time, so I just started petting my cat and thought about scary stuff that I watched a few days ago. I look to my cabinets and see a glowing, white figure. I don't know if my house is haunted, but this makes me believe it is. It looked as if it was searching for something in the cabinets, and after a few minutes, it stopped. I was able to see the rest of its body from the position I was in. The ghost's legs were gone, and so was the area around the pelvis. It was still the whole time I was looking at it, which unnerved me because I didn't know what was happening. I look to my left and see 2 pairs of eyes looking back at me. 2 black cats just staring back at me. I was freaking out a little actually. It felt like an hour as I was just looking at the figures. Eventually, I turned on the light, and it all disappeared. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but I don't know. I never believed in ghosts, but I have always enjoyed stories about paranormal phenomena. However, I had never experienced anything myself until the end of 2022. The first time it all started was when they gave me a Barney from someone else. That week I started having sleep paralysis or nightmares every day. In the paralysis, there was always a black shadow, like a person who stayed in the corner of my room. Initially, I believed it was merely stress, but I began noticing shadows manifesting within my residence and even at school. At that moment I thought I was going crazy. I felt like I was constantly being watched. He acted normal, since at that time he lived with a very Christian family. I didn't want to have an exorcism or anything like that, but then I couldn't sleep. Even in the paralysis, the shadows tried to talk to me, they whispered my name, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I started taking sleeping pills every day, and I didn't dream at all, and then I thought the stress was gone. In another memory, it was a nightmare. That day my mother slept with me since we watched a movie together. After the nightmare, I woke up and was scared. I stood on the corner of the bed, and the bed started to shake. At that moment, my mom woke up and asked me if I was okay, and I said yes and checked my phone. It was 3:33 a.m. I just looked to see if there were any shakes, and nothing ever shook. I convinced myself that it was my imagination, but the next day I told my mom, and she told me that she also had nightmares and felt shaking. In the end I dreamed of a white and luminous shadow. It wanted to talk to me, and I yelled at it to leave me alone, and that's how the whole year ended. I didn't dream anything anymore, everything was normal, and then we moved. When we first moved in, I started having sleep paralysis where a shadow always appeared in my room. Where we moved, there is a room that always gave me a bad feeling. One day I was taking random photos of myself, and I took that photo. It was clear that no type of light was entering that room. The windows of that room were sealed. Then I adopted a cat, since they say they scare away spirits. Now I do believe in negative energy and all that. Non-believer encounters? I am a non-believer. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits, and I don't do anything to seek them out. However, after moving to a new apartment in a new city with my child and boyfriend, I have had several encounters I could not ignore. I'd like to know if there are any explanations for this or if it is indeed paranormal. In my apartment, my daughter said the place had a ghost. Only ever said it once, we laughed it off. But I and my boyfriend kept hearing each other call the other's name when we were sometimes less than 3 feet apart in the apartment. Several times I've seen my door pushed open as I lay on my bed facing the door, and each time I blamed the wind from open windows. But then I started to be home alone since work was kind of slow. I stood at my bar counter in the kitchen just eating tuna and staring at my daughter's drawings on the fridge when I heard the microwave door pushed open as if I clicked it, and the thing freaking slowly opened as I stood there. I froze and didn't look directly at it. I'm not familiar with anything paranormal. I called my boyfriend and family freaking out, showing them a photo I took from the spot I didn't move from. I was completely home alone, and the last time we used it was 2 days before, and we tend to slam it a little. Then, I was on the couch about a week ago, and a book fell from my little library. I heard it, it was loud, and I wasn't near it. I ignored it for a while and then checked, and the book was completely tucked underneath the shelf. But it would have fallen in front, from the way I hear it, right? Also, we have those iron bookends with the books pushed in tight. How did it even fall? Then, on the same couch, I had my wrist screws in a bag in front of me. I had surgery a few weeks back, and my doctor let me keep the screws from the first surgery. I was cleaning before, I had them on the end but not on the edge of the couch. They had been there a while as I was working on my laptop. Then I started hearing a rolling sound, and I didn't want to look but made myself, and one of the screws in the bag was rolling from one end to the other. This is a small sealed blue bag with not much air inside. I didn't move, I had been there a while with it there. There were also no open windows because the gardeners were working outside. Just now I had closed my door because I'm sick and want to sleep. I remember slamming it. As I'm watching videos in bed, I hear a door open, like with a handle, but I thought it was the video, paused it, and saw my door now peeked open. I don't have many family members who have passed away. 2 estranged grandparents and my abuelo. But I do have a cadaver bone in my wrist. Are there explanations for this? Why me? My dad says I need cats in the house, but I'm allergic now. We grew up with cats, so maybe that's why I never experienced anything before? I'm super over it, honestly. It went from scary to straight, causing me anger. I want to be left alone. One night at around 4 or so I had been awake just wasting my sleep away on my phone. It had been raining, and I was suddenly feeling very scared, quite possibly a gut feeling of some sort. I heard a knock come from my window, so I looked over to investigate. Of course, when I explained this story, most people told me it was the rain. But the knocking was definitely a lot louder and stood out from all the pitter-patter. And as if on cue, lightning strikes, and I see the outline of a hand and an arm. It was resting on the glass pane and clenched in a fist. Yeah, hell no. I freaked out. I looked back again, and the hand was gone. I don't normally believe in paranormal stuff, so I keep telling myself that I was hearing and seeing things. I was on the second floor, for Pete's sake. No one would possibly be insane enough to just decide to knock on my window. At least that's what I tell myself. I have zero photo evidence but have had multiple encounters with passed-on spirits. I say ghost because it's just an easy term, but it's a lot more complicated than that. I believe everything has an energy force, spirit, that does not die but gets released and spread elsewhere where energy is needed. There are so many things our eyes will never ever be able to see regardless of scientific advances, our brains will just not accept or compute it. We are too small compared to the universe. So, when someone we love passes on, I imagine the spirit lingers with those it loved the most, specific places or moments in their time, another life struggling nearby, the bright light people claim to see before waking up, into the air when cremated, and into the soil when buried. I accept what I cannot see or understand, so maybe that's why I'm somewhat more aware when something weird is going on. Instance 1. Papa passed away when I was about 11. About a year after moving to a new house, I awoke to the sound of sawing and hammering in the ceiling above me. Scared the shit out of me. I could hear it clear as day. I went into the room next to me and still heard it, but my little sister was still asleep. It went on for hours. Mom said I was nuts. It happened again another night after we were told we were moving back to our actual home. Stepdad was taking a job out of the house driving a truck. It was a strange time at home. Then we moved back home. Every year after that Christmas and my birthday, the same noise, sawing and hammering from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., was heard in the ceiling above me. At 16 years old, I had all 3 other siblings sleep in my room with me on Christmas Eve so they could hear it. 3 a.m. Sawing and hammering. Wake them up, and they cannot hear it when I do. Made me feel nuts. Instance 2. My husband's mother passed away in 2016. We have been off and on for most of our lives but never fully committed. In 2018, I moved into the house where my husband's mother passed away, and we lived there while saving money to buy our own home. My husband had purchased me black stud diamond look-alike earrings. When going out, I wear all 5 earrings in the 5 holes I have pierced between both ears. When taking them out, I take out all 5 at the same time and put them all together no matter the sobriety condition. One day we are getting ready to go out, and I sit at my vanity to put in all 5 earrings, but there are only 3. This isn't right, lol. It was a big ordeal. I had cleaned off this vanity, moved everything, pledge polished the shit out of it, rearranged it, and put nothing on the floor. They were gone. I waited 3 months, complaining about my missing earrings, feeling really upset and confused, but also knowing deep down that they were gone. I broke down and went to Kay and charged my card for some brand new opal earrings to make up for the loss. This was on Thursday. Now here I am Friday getting ready for the concert we are going to. I look down to get something, and there are the black earrings sitting right next to each other in the same spot the 3 were months ago. This one made me rage. I knew something was off. She had been making other appearances, but I was blowing them off. When napping I would hear someone come home and unload groceries. No one was ever there. When doing dishes I would feel tapping on the shoulder or back. When turning around there was always a lingering white feather within 6 feet or so. When I get really upset with her son and we are arguing outside, I am instantly greeted by a cardinal and then a butterfly. Our daughter is named after her, and I feel secure knowing there is a force that I cannot see that can see and protect her. Feel free to call me crazy, I know how I perceive it. You appreciate more when you accept more, even if you can't see it. I didn't believe in them at all. Then one night I saw some crazy shit. Been trying to make excuses ever since. Years ago I was staying at my mother-in-law's house. It's really old. There is a bedroom upstairs way out of the way, and they all get up early, so I decided to sleep up there since it was my only shot to sleep late. I was going to bed when I saw something begin to rise from the bottom of the bed. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, but it was still there. It was very dark, but I could make out edges, semi-transparent black-purple pulsating, kind of like smoke. Panic shot through my body like lightning. In my mind I was like, oh shit. Oh shit. This isn't happening. It rose up from the bottom of the bed and then began to hover above me as if it were going to be directly overhead. Then it was gone. I went to sleep back downstairs. Later that night I had a very vivid dream. There was an attractive lady about my age crying uncontrollably. I tried to console her, but she was just too hurt to be comforted. She couldn't talk. It was very frustrating to her that she couldn't communicate with me. The next day I told the story, and my mill looked pretty concerned. The family who lived there before her had a daughter who passed away, and that was her room. Maybe I saw her ghost, and she was sad that she had made me so terrified when she didn't mean to scare me. Maybe she came to me in my dream to tell me that. A paranormal event, I think, occurred to me, and I'm very scared. I need help figuring out what it is. Can anyone help? On the 5th of February this year, I saw a glitch. It is quite hard to describe, but I was lying in bed at night, and, well, I saw a glitch. Whether that is the real name of what I saw, who knows, but I'm going to call it that considering that's all I can think to describe it as. I lay in my bed, just watching Netflix, specifically Peep Show, yes, I have taste LOL. And all of a sudden, everything just disappeared. I stayed in the exact same place, and I could feel everything that was originally there, but all I could see ahead of me was land, like mud and grass and rock, and certain holes, etc., in certain areas of this mud and grass and sometimes rock. And during this I heard deep voices speaking what seemed to be gibberish. Personally I was shook, but soon after everything went back to normal. Personally, I shrugged it off as likely a hallucination or dream or something logical, because in reality I was scared and wanted an excuse to call it nothing. But as the days have gone on, it's been pondered in my mind more and more. I'm scared. I've never in the past had any bad mental states apart from anxiety, and dreams I remember don't ever tend to feel as real as that moment, so I don't know what to call this. And I don't understand how I could have actually done something like hallucinate on a normal night. I haven't told anyone because I'm scared that someone could judge me and send me somewhere I don't want to go to get help with this thing I saw. I don't exactly even know what I myself mean by this, but I guess it's just anxiety coming back in the form of me thinking people will automatically assume I'm not in a normal mental state, despite the fact I feel as normal as any other normal day, so no one knows. So please, can someone explain this? Help, I don't believe in the paranormal, but my lizard brain is now convinced that ghosts are trying to kill me. This whole thing has left me emotionally confused. I'm normally a very rational person, and so is my husband. When I visited Edinburgh with my university's science summer school program, I didn't go on the touristy haunted vaults tour with my friends. Edinburgh has vaults underneath the city, because I wanted to wait until my husband arrived and we could do it together. I asked my friends how they liked it, and they said it was very entertaining but that they truly got an uneasy feeling in the last room. The guide made them walk in a circle with their eyes closed and counted to 3, at which point they were supposed to point to the corner that made them the most uneasy and then open their eyes. They all pointed to the far left corner, and their guide told them it was the most haunted room because a little boy had been inundated there by a soldier, and people, especially men, often got scratches from standing in that particular corner. I obviously took none of that seriously and instead admired how good these tour guides were at storytelling. When my husband arrived 2 weeks later, we chose the midnight tour of the same thing. It was all really entertaining, etc., until we got to the last room. I instantly felt terrible, as if I was coming down with the flu. The guide didn't tell us the same story. Instead, he just said that this was the last room and it often showed the most activity. He then told us that as the grand finale of the tour, he'd blow out his candle for a minute and let us stand there in the darkness. I was scared shitless at this point and really glad I could squeeze the life out of my husband's hand, who is built like a mountain and generally unimpressed by these kinds of stunts. Used to be a professional discus thrower. A few seconds run by in the darkness, and I start to calm down as suddenly, it feels like my husband's hand is ripped from mine as he gets pulled backwards. I scream, and the guide quickly turns on his flashlight. There, in the far left corner, a good meter away from where he just stood, is my husband, convulsing on the floor, his eyes in the back of his head. The tour guide and some other men went to shake him and steady his head, and a few seconds later, 10 to 20, he came to again and stopped convulsing, but he was absolutely confused. He just repeatedly said, "Who am I? Who was that?" over and over. As soon as he could stand, still confused, the guide very quickly ushered us all out of the vaults, and before I could ask anything, he was gone. The other tour members helped me to get something to drink for my husband as he sat on the curb, regaining his bearings. My husband never fainted or had an epileptic attack before. When we got home we had him checked, including long-term EEG, etc. They found nothing, and everything seems fine. My husband's only reaction to this was, "Yeah, that's really weird." Shrug. I do not believe in paranormal stuff rationally, but now, some primal part of me is doubting that, and I hate it. Can someone give me an explanation for this, please? Scene 1? I'd call it an experience rather than seeing with my eyes, and it left me living in terror in my home for more than 2 years. I never believed in ghosts. I thought all of these people were trolling and trying to be edgelords for attention. I honestly hated even hearing the word ghost. I should clarify that I do not currently experience, nor have I ever experienced, any form of psychosis or similar conditions. It happened in my current home. I lived here for 18 months before anything happened. It was November, shortly before 11 p.m., and I was playing Among Us. I went to the toilet and peed, and as I was sorting my trousers out, I heard a weird noise a few feet away. The shampoo bottle, more than half full, was rocking side to side slowly. No windows were open, and nothing came into contact with it, not even possible from that distance. It rocked left, right, and stopped. I was so scared I couldn't move. More incidents occurred. Every night between 10:52 and early morning, I began hearing strange sounds. I would sit on my PC focusing on a game or studying and suddenly feel like someone was standing in my kitchen or a few feet away watching me. It was enough to distract me. I walked into the kitchen and felt areas of sudden cold. We had a carpet at the time, and behind me around this time I heard a loud plucking sound in the corner as though an animal was yanking at the carpet. We do not have a pet capable of this, and our pet was in his cage at the time. When I searched, there was nothing there. One of these nights I went to the toilet. We had a mirror above the sink, and when I was washing my hands, I glimpsed something in the mirror behind me. I didn't see what it was, but when I turned around, my entire body felt cold. It was like another person was standing there menacingly a few feet away, staring at me. I was so afraid I couldn't move. I kept washing my hands for 2 to 3 minutes before the feeling faded and I ran out of the room. These encounters happened a number of times. The worst was when I felt someone step up behind me, turned around, and nobody was there. He did this multiple times. These incidents were so bad I was frightened to go to the toilet at night. I could hear him walk around sometimes at night too. This presence continued the entire time. A few weeks later I woke up in the middle of the night and felt like someone was standing over me. I had this horrible feeling, and in my mind I could see this old man with a balding head and very piercing, unnatural black eyes staring at me. A few weeks later I woke up and saw black writing all over the walls in the hall and a horrible darkness in the doorway to my daughter's bedroom. I blinked twice, and it all disappeared. I was so frightened it was hard to get back to sleep. The image of this man was in my mind. I knew where he was, and I felt him like another person standing there, but I couldn't see him with my eyes, if that makes sense. I had nightmares about him that felt very different from normal nightmares. Always the same man with the black eyes and the evil smile. They were always malicious. One contained a creepy house in the woods full of saws and things to end people. I'd wake up, and he was in the room. I would be falling asleep and suddenly feel someone in the room. I could tell when he was in my daughter's room. He would go and look at her and then leave. Around this time I also began having severe nightmares and my first incidents of sleep paralysis. I'd never experienced anything like it before. One time my husband and I were sitting on our computers around 7 p.m. Behind us was our daughter's table with 2 wooden chairs placed neatly on the top. Suddenly, both chairs came crashing down and ended up around 2 to 3 feet away on the floor. Nothing touched them, and they were far too heavy for any breeze to take down. He did not believe me until he witnessed his incident, and he started yelling at the ghost. He was annoyed with my constant panicking. He went to bed a few hours earlier than me every night. Over time the image of this man became clearer. He would stand over me when I was on the computer at night. Sometimes he would blow a sudden puff of freezing air down my neck. He would do it in the kitchen too. I heard him laugh twice, but he never spoke with words. The man was around 5 feet 7 inches -8, slim build, elderly, and balding. Definitely white. I think he was the ghost of the elderly man who lived in the house before that was forced into a care home and passed away shortly before these incidents happened. I didn't find out until later that he died. I learned to ignore him. Fear is what fueled him. I could tell he wanted me to do something, and he kept loitering near the kitchen window and back door. He would watch me on the PC constantly, and one time he laughed at the music I listened to. And then one day this monster of a man saved my life. I was on the PC gaming and ignoring him. He was there, as usual, looming and walking between me and the kitchen. He started being really pushy, standing up against me and freezing me and breathing on me. Eventually he huffed so loudly I heard it the same as if another person was sitting next to me. I took my headset off, and he immediately went into the kitchen, so I followed. He was standing outside the kitchen window staring in at me with his slightly rotten face. I went to the window, and he drew back. There was a man wearing a hood and a black face mask in my back garden staring at me. An actual man this time, not this ghost man. I was so scared my entire body seized up. I made it back to the doorway, but I couldn't move from terror. The freeze response is horrid. I told myself I would hide and check in 2 minutes, and if he was there, I would call the police. Needless to say, I was fine that night. I genuinely believe if I hadn't jumped up and followed that damn corpse, that intruder may have broken in and done something horrible. I locked eyes with that intruder. I don't know if the ghost, I called Derek, did something to chase the intruder or if it was that I'd seen him that made him run. I realized that this man was tormenting me because his beautiful garden had fallen to absolute disrepair. When I began sorting it, he started to calm down and eventually became somewhat friendly. We had a few normal interactions too. He didn't scare me, and I'd roll my eyes at him when he tried. He wasn't that scary anymore, and by the time the garden was in better condition, he disappeared. For a little while after, I heard a cat at night running up and down our stairs. We don't have a cat. I haven't seen this man in more than a year now, and I'm glad, but I also miss him. If you're still around, Derek, I hope you've found peace. I'll never forget you. It isn't scary, but it made me wonder and start to believe. My grandma died in '96. A few years earlier my uncle had visited her and brought his cats with him. She accidentally let one out, and after a day or two of looking for the cat, he assumed it was gone and had to head back home, 3.5 hours away. My mom said my grandma always hated herself for not noticing the cat at her feet when she went outside. She lost her son's cat on him. So after she died, we had an open casket viewing. I don't remember much. I was 12 and just remember crying huddled up next to my grandpa. We all went back to his house and sat on the front step, just waiting. It was my uncle's cat. Cats up here have a tattoo inside their inner ear by a vet, a registration number or something, so if a cat ever is lost, they can look it up and find the owner. So it was my uncle's cat. He confirmed it with the vet. It was just weird. A few nights after she died, when my uncle was there, we just happened to come home to find the cat waiting for us. A few years ago, my ex-boyfriend's closest friend purchased a house, and we all relocated there together, along with my dog. I tell this story all the time, and I don't honestly care if people believe me or not. Sometimes thinking back, I even ask myself, was that real? But it was. It started out small, like, every once in a while I'd get this twinge of fear or discomfort when I was alone in the house. Then I started noticing my dog refused to go in the basement. Refused. The basement was unfinished and had rough walls and dirt floors in some parts because the house was just old. That's where the laundry was. I noticed she would follow me to the first landing on the stairs and then sit or lie there watching me, but she would not for the life of her come down. I even tried feeding her down there once, coaxing her with treats, nothing. One afternoon my roommate and I were watching TV in the living room. And I started hearing some sounds like doors moving or floorboards creaking, and they just didn't sound right, but that's crazy, right? So I didn't say anything. Eventually my roommate muted the TV and asked, "Are you hearing that?" It sounded so distinctly like there was a person in the house with us that when we went upstairs to look, he dead-ass stopped me on the stairs and said to me, "I just want you to know I have a gun in the house." Nothing there. After a few weeks, that feeling of discomfort when alone in the house was very, very palpable. It was just so uncomfortable to be there alone. One afternoon, again, I was sitting in the living room watching TV, except this time I was alone with my dog. The stairway is to my right. My dog suddenly jumps up and is looking right up the stairs like she sees something. She starts barking, and I try to quiet her. She calms down for a second but then keeps getting up and barking, staring up the stairs, walking up to the bottom of the stairs and then backing away and growling, repeat. She is freaking me out. The duck. Out. My heart is fully pounding, and I need her to stop. So I figure I will take her upstairs and show her there is nothing there so she calms down, because there's nothing there, right? Because I'm alone in the house? So I kind of gently guide her up the stairs, and sure, nothing there. I decide I might as well tidy my room while I'm up here, so I walk to the end of the hall and flip on the light to my room, and the light bulb pops and sparks and goes the duck out. So at this point I'm like, okay. Either there is something here and you can run away in fear, there is something here and you can stay and show you aren't afraid, or you can calm the duck down and stop being jumpy because this is just a weird coincidence. So I decide to stay. I walk across the room and start making the bed when my pineal gland just starts screaming at me that there is something in the room with me. And the hair on the back of my neck rises. And my dog starts to growl, and the blinds to my right snap up and start spinning. I shit you not, I dropped everything, turned around, grabbed my dog and my bag, and ran out of the house and did not come back until everyone else was home. But that's not even the worst. A few weeks later, I woke up dreaming in the middle of the night, sort of floating somewhere between awake and asleep, and in this lucid dream I think I'm having, a man in a suit comes out of the closet, walks across the room, and leans down over my ex-boyfriend's head like he is going to whisper something in his ear. In real life, my ex-boyfriend rolls over and pushes me a little and says, "Babe, stop wiping stuff on my face." The next morning, when we woke up, My ex said he had a strange lucid dream where someone came out of the closet and screamed in his ear, "Are you happy now? Are you happy now? Are you happy now?" Say what you will. But this shit happened. It was a dark period in my life and my ex's, and I truly think that something in that house fed off of all the pain and anger in us both that we were carrying around, and I think that genuinely gave whatever was there enough of its energy to actually manifest itself. We moved. My ghost stories, my haunted life. So, as we have come to know, I have many experiences with ghosts and the paranormal in general. I have ghosts that follow me around. We have my good friend, Wyatt, his twin brother, Thomas, and my husband's little friend, Anna. Those are the main ones that I deal with daily. There are a few others who live in my home. There's Charlie, who usually hides behind my mother-in-law's chair, playing jacks. There's an indigenous teen who mostly paces back and forth in my mother-in-law's room by her window. He feels very protective of her due to a spirit that stalks outside her window trying to get through. Some non-ghost entities live with me. There are Bob and Karen. Bob is a succubus, don't ask, I don't know, and Karen is an incubus, again, I don't know. I gave them the choice of what I would call them, and they chose those names. I encounter some very odd entities. There are others, some of whom just pop in from time to time, like my stepdad and my husband's grandmother. The pets are a couple of dogs, some cats, and, oddly enough, some fish. The three main dogs that live here from time to time are my husband's dog, Daisy. She was a boxer/beagle mix and one of the sweetest dogs I've had the pleasure of knowing. Then there is Apache, she was my baby. She was supposed to be a pit bull and Rottweiler/Saint Bernard. However, she was a long-haired dog, which I know Saint Bernards are, but she didn't look like a Saint Bernard. My family and I believe that her dad was either a coyote or a wolf. It fits better with her build and coloring. There are too many cat spirits to count. My family has had cats for as long as I can remember. The most prominent one that shows up is my son's cat, Sinister, and yes, he named her. He called her Sin Sin, and she was pitch black, with a small white spot on her chest. She pops in from time to time, and because my current dog is about the size of a cat, we sometimes mistake Sinister for Sweet Pea. The fish are the weird ones. Seeing little things float through the air, or thinking you see a fish in the tub or sink, can be kind of jarring. Something that most psychics/mediums won't always tell you is that we are constantly surrounded by ghosts and demons, not the Christian version. What a lot of ghost hunters won't tell you is that not all entities are evil or out to hurt you. Most of them are just trying to live their deaths. So, if you encounter a spirit in a new home or just out in the wild, remember they aren't there to hurt you for the most part. Contrary to what some people may believe. This might have been nothing, but it terrified me. Before I begin, I want to clarify that I sleep on the first floor and can never hear anything outside at night, so I cannot explain this situation. Anyways, I was up somewhat late, around 2 to 3, texting a friend. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was getting ready to put on some Netflix and head to bed when I heard talking. It wasn't like mumbling from neighbors or anything, I could hear what they were saying. This was about 4 months ago, I don't remember specifically what they were saying. Another thing, it wasn't talking like it was starting a conversation. It sounded like it was mid-conversation. I'm confused, and I was confused and scared, honestly, so a minute or two goes by, and the talking is still going, but what goes along with it is some shuffling around with a calm-mannered conversation still going. I decide to lift up one blind to see if my neighbors are for some reason out, but no, their porch lights are off and nobody's out there, but what I also noticed was the second I opened it, the talking stopped, and so did the shuffling, it all stopped. And I still think about this a ton. I can't explain what happened, but it terrified me. I don't believe in ghosts, but I have no explanation for this. I'm a college student, and I recently got a small house with a roommate who, before moving in with them, I had never met. We've lived here for nearly 3 months now, and there have been some pretty creepy noises, but there are 2 things in particular that really freaked us out. Any thoughts would be appreciated. For the sake of privacy, we'll say my name is Cody and my roommate's name is Mike. Mike and I both have an obsession for horror movies, so we watch them pretty much every night. Our house has a fully covered balcony, meaning that no one can get in from the outside unless we unlock the door. One night, we were watching Jeepers Creepers, and out of nowhere, we heard a very loud bang coming from the balcony. Our dog was inside, so it couldn't have been her. It was very unmistakably coming from inside our balcony. We were pretty much certain it couldn't have been coming from outside of it. The only things out there are a barbecue grill and a table, neither of which had fallen over when we went outside to investigate. Nothing could have possibly made that noise. It was really freaky, but we both kind of forgot about it. Just yesterday, something very bizarre, and in my opinion the scariest of the two incidents, occurred. We both went out to see the movie The Boy. Before we leave, we always make sure the dog is outside. She has a tendency to shit and piss everywhere in the house when we leave her in. I triple-checked that she was outside and that the sliding door was locked so she couldn't push it open. When we got home, she was inside. Mike and I panicked, and we frantically checked the house to make sure no one had broken in. Nothing was missing, and no one was there, and the door was still locked. As I said before, I don't believe in ghosts, but this is a bit too creepy to ignore. If any of you have thoughts, please leave a comment, and thanks for listening. I try to remain objective. I don't even believe in ghosts. But more and more strange things keep happening. It's a cliché, I'm not a believer in the paranormal at all. But too many things have happened in my house this year that make me question my beliefs. Especially what has happened in the last 2 weeks is heavier, but I still don't know what to think. I live with my parents. The house is big and has several floors. It won't be much more than 65 years old. My mother believes in ghosts, while my father does not. However, he has been open to the idea, even though he has not experienced much himself and has only felt things at most. Not seen. Just felt. Like an icy cold in a certain area of the house at night. My mother and I have seen it. My grandparents used to live on the first floor of the house. Both of them have been dead for several years. We live upstairs in a unit that was built about 17 years ago, shortly after my birth. Well, paranormal things have never happened here. Or at least just the right things, occasional things that could have another explanation. But at the beginning of this year, things started to happen to me. Casual and slight things, like the occasional light switch turning on. And mind you, not just the bulb, but seeing the button being pressed in front of my eyes. A tap turning on slowly. Here at 4 o'clock in the morning, a locked door opens and closes on the ground floor. Hear rhythmic knocking on the other side of the wall, thinking it's my mother. My mother thought it was me. Speaking of my mother, she has seen more shocking things, like a white smoke passing in front of the mirror, as if it were Casper, in her words. A kind of black object, floating, tangible but almost a vision, that surrounded her from shoulder to shoulder. I could go on telling anecdotes, although I admit that I am more visual. I hardly pay attention to things like feeling cold, feeling that there is someone looking at you, or listening for footsteps, even if I have felt them myself. My mother is convinced it's my grandfather. She has almost no reason to think it's him and not my grandmother or anyone else. Or anything apart from a ghost. At most I can say that he had a very distinctive smell and that we've smelled it again sometime after he died. Like recently, in the kitchen, with my dog barking at nothing, I was talking to my mother about the distinctive smell we hadn't smelled in years, only for the TV to suddenly come on. However, recent events have provided us with additional thought-provoking moments. 2 or 3 weeks ago my mother saw a hand wave animatedly at her through the glass of a door upstairs. She thought it was me, so she waved back, to which the hand waved back vigorously. My father was next to her. I was 10 feet from that door, sitting. There was no one else in the house. And last week she was in the bathroom, door closed. It was about 1 a.m. when someone knocked on the door. I say someone and not something because there was no wind. Everything, absolutely everything, was closed. And it wasn't a light movement. It was 2 loud knocks on a completely calm and quiet night. My mother shouted my name, thinking it was me. Just after that, she heard footsteps walking away toward my room. My father and I were asleep. If you want more anecdotes, I can give you more. Here are just some of them told in a light-hearted way. While I was writing this, I remembered more ha ha ha. But well, it's time to sleep here, so I'll say goodbye. I hope the ghost doesn't bother us too much today. In 2017, I stayed in an old, large house for a week in Austria. This house had to have been 100 years old at least. Beautiful place, sitting right in a small village in a valley of the Alps. 2 stories with a large basement and an attic at the top of the stairs, so 3, I guess. I slept on the 2nd floor with my ex. The trip was beautiful, however, that isn't the story I'm meant to tell. Throughout the week, this place started becoming more and more strange. Started off by noticing small things out of place, like cups and shoes, and hearing weird noises during the nighttime. After a few days, the noises started getting louder, and the things that appeared out of place were much larger, like drawers opened and wardrobes shifted. By the 6th day, I was lying in bed, mid-conversation with my ex, when we were interrupted by a scratching noise upstairs in the attic. It kind of sounded like a chair being dragged across the floor, audibly being moved across the floor. When the noise stopped, she and I both whispered, "What the duck is that?" As soon as we said this, the shutter to the window my bed was next to slammed closed and scared the hell out of us both. The next day, I was curious. I went up the stairs to see a bunch of junk piled in front of the attic door. After moving all the stuff in front of the door, I noticed a wooden crucifix hanging from the door. I had already made it this far, so I decided to continue on. I grabbed the handle to the door, but it was locked. I had the keys to the house with me, so I fumbled through them until I found the key that matched. It was a vintage key, one that you'd see in the movies with the end of the key hollow to go over the pin in the keyhole. I unlocked the door and slowly opened the door. There was only one thing in that attic that I could see from the door. A chair. I used to live in an old family home when I was younger. Lots of people within the family have seen and heard things. My mother had seen things, such as a little boy who looked like my brother, one time. No other children lived in the house except for me and him, so Mom asked us if we had playmates over. She's seen other things since then, but as for me, I've only heard things in the house, but nothing too creepy. However, there was one afternoon I came home from school. I was 12. I get dropped off home and would usually come in from the back door. We had a wooden door and had a screen door on the outside. I would always have to knock because that screen door would always be locked to get air into the house. Usually it was my uncle who would open it for me. This is a daily thing for us, by the way. I don't know why, but I would always look in and see when he's coming because he'd sleep in the afternoon, and it would sometimes take me a few hard knocks to wake him. I waited outside the door for a few minutes, and I looked in and saw him and started talking to him, but somehow he was just standing beside our dining table, doing nothing, with his side facing me. So I was like, "Hey, uncle, what's going on? Why aren't you opening the door? I'm hot, please open it." No answer. Kept talking to him, but I was getting impatient at this point, so I said, "Hey, uncle." That thing looked at me with glowing red eyes. It was so fast, I was so taken aback by this that I flinched and ran away from the door. It was the kind of head spin that you get from horror films to create a jump scare. I saw a full-bodied doppelganger of my uncle. I have never seen anything full-bodied before, only shadows. My real uncle did wake up and open the door for me. He was apologetic, saying he just woke up from his nap, hence why it took him a few minutes to open the door for me. Also, whatever I had seen had the same clothes on as my uncle when he opened the door for me, so that scared me a lot more, lol. I've had a few paranormal encounters before and thereafter, but that was the only time I've ever seen a full-bodied apparition. It's safe to say that I don't ever want to see any more of them, lol. I feel like I don't even know what to believe anymore. I grew up not believing in ghosts, simply because I myself had never encountered one. I just refused to believe in something that I've never seen. But, about a year ago, I had an encounter that I'm 100% sure was real, and nobody else around me seems to be taking it as seriously as me. It's been a year, and I still think about it. I'd snuck downstairs at midnight to grab a drink and a little snack, and when I came back upstairs, I heard in the back corner of the hallway my name whispered. It was so loud and so clear that there's no way I could have mistaken it to be anything else. Everyone else in my house was asleep, I checked, and all TVs were off. It was just so defined and so real. I mentioned it to my parents the next day, and they sort of shrugged it off. And then a few nights ago, I was downstairs eating at night again, and my fight or flight randomly kicked in. It was like my entire body woke up with awareness and adrenaline, and my senses were on overdrive. So I grabbed my food and started speedwalking to the stairs. I swear I heard a whisper right behind me, but I wasn't able to hear it as clearly, and I have no idea what it said. Maybe come back or wait or something? Not sure. Can someone explain what this could be or what it might mean? Could I have something attached to me? I need someone to give me their thoughts because otherwise I feel like I'm going crazy. You won't believe it, and I barely do. I'm about 30, and most of these occurred between ages 10 and 20. Apologies in advance, they may often be long-winded. When I was 10 years old, my family moved from Toronto to a small town of about 1,000 people in rural New Brunswick, Canada. It is a historic area, mostly old-timers, with a strong religious culture to the point that this town of 1,000 people has 6 large churches and several smaller ones. The house we moved into was a small duplex, with us occupying both top and bottom, and there were no other houses for about 1 kilometer. The only other property/place nearby was the historic graveyard with graves dating at the earliest to the 1800s, and this was about 20 feet from the house, as the place had been the old gravekeepers. On the day of my 11th birthday I had invited a friend to sleep over. While my sisters were sleeping upstairs, I had the only room in the basement to myself, which had been converted from a wine cellar. Enough setup. On the night of the sleepover everything had been normal so far, aside from the usual weird feelings, traps turning on themselves, which I didn't think was spooky yet, and lights flickering, which we also think was just normal for the area. My parents were out drinking, and when my sisters went to bed around 10 p.m., my friend and I went to bed shortly after, turning off all the lights, popping on the oil heater, dead of winter at the time, and setting up his sleeping bag on the floor of my room. Around midnight, known because of the chime clock, I woke in bed feeling uneasy and frigidly cold. I sat awake for about 20 or so minutes, it felt like, until I started hearing strange noises. They sounded like an old man moaning in pain and a chain or something metal dragging on the floor on the other side of my door. I tried to ignore it, but soon after, my friend started shaking me, thinking I was asleep, and panicking because they also heard the noises. The noises continued for about 5 more minutes or so, and then he begged me to turn on the lights because they were scared. I flicked on the small lamp at the foot of my bed, and just a few moments later my friend started screaming and pointing to the ceiling. On the ceiling, covering the whole space, were what looked like dozens of shadowy hands/arms stretching out from above, reaching down towards us but too far away to really grab anything. My friend was religious and started praying in a loud voice over and over and asking the hands to stop. They soon did, and for a moment everything was fine again. It got warm, the hands were gone, and my friend and I both were starting to calm down. Then it got much, much worse. Suddenly the lamp turned off, everything went from kind of dark to completely black, and it was dead silent. A figure, which I can only describe as a tall shadowy person draped entirely in a black robe and carrying a large book, walks through the wall to my left, which was at most 5 feet from my feet. We could only see them because, despite being all black, they were illuminated in a bright reddish/yellow glow. The figure stopped, turned, and stared at me for an uncomfortable amount of time and eventually held up a long, not crazy long, but like maybe 6 inches, finger in my direction, then pointed to their book, which then opened by itself. At this point I let out the loudest scream I possibly could, hoping to wake my sisters, only to notice there was no sound. I looked to my friend, who has their mouth open, looking like they are screaming as well, and still no sound. I look to the window to see if maybe my parents are back, hoping they are, and the window is pitch black, not even the outside light is shining through, or the usually spooky view of the graveyard I have, just blackness. I look back to the figure, and it starts to move towards me, but I suddenly feel like there is no threat and feel a kind and knowing feeling almost like you get from your grandparents or animals, and it walks towards me and disappears just before it comes into contact with my feet. Immediately after they disappear, the light comes back on, the window is no longer black, and I can hear again. I hear my door banging and my dad screaming at me from the other side. He has been there for hours, apparently, unable to get in, hearing me and my friend screaming at the top of our lungs from the other side. I get up and let him in, which I had no problem with from my side, and he lets me know what he just heard. He also lets me know about the couple of hours part, which to me didn't make sense because from what I judged by the time this went on, it was at the latest 1 a.m. It was 7 a.m., the sun was actually just starting to come up, which I now just noticed through the window. My friend called his parents to come get him immediately and shortly after left. I sat up with my dad as everyone else went back to sleep, and we had a chat in the kitchen. Apparently, this wasn't the first scary thing to happen in the house in the few weeks we had been there. My mother, who was a homemaker and at the house all the time, had been hearing moaning sounds during the day, seen the appliances turn themselves on and off, and said that she kept being woken up by the sound of someone screaming in her ear in the middle of the night. My dad didn't believe it initially, but after I described to him my encounter and the fact he couldn't get into my room despite there being no lock on any door in our house, he started to. We moved out of that house less than a month later, which, to be honest, financially destroyed my family. We couldn't find a buyer because locals thought the place to be very haunted, and we had to rent a small 2-bedroom bungalow. For the rest of my young life, that friend would never talk to me or hang out with me again, despite having been my best friend up to that point, I thought. Years later, at a gathering upon returning from university, I encountered him by the campfire and initiated a conversation. We went over what each had been up to, what our goals were, etc. Eventually I asked why he stopped hanging out with me. He told me he still vividly remembered that night and then described it exactly how I remembered it, down to the smallest details. He said that when he got home, he told his father what had happened, and his father, who is the spiritual leader of their tribe, Native American, I won't specify the reservation here, instructed him to avoid any contact with me because there was a malicious spirit associated with me that could start following him. Eventually he stopped caring about that, and that's why he even talked to me at that party. End of encounter 1. Please let me know if you have questions or have had anything similar happen. I genuinely feel like I encountered something really unique compared to most, and that is what scares me about this. 2 Ghost stories. Whatever your beliefs as far as the paranormal, I'll just say that these two instances are 100% true. I experienced them. I've always believed in the paranormal because I feel, how could anyone be positive that something doesn't exist? Even if I haven't seen little gray men or Bigfoot, hundreds of people have. Even so, I've been blessed or cursed with a very practical, analytical mind. I watch real ghost hunting shows with a grain of salt, always asking how this could have been faked. Many times it is fake. But not all. Many things have happened to me that I dismissed as something else. So I'm only telling you these that I can't dismiss. My first experience occurred at a famous seaside restaurant in California. It's been featured on numerous ghost hunting shows, as well as on Unsolved Mysteries. I lived about 30 minutes from the place, but I hadn't been there. I finally got to have dinner there with a boyfriend. I was fascinated, asking the employees about their experiences with their infamous specter. See, I was happy to have a paranormal experience, as long as I wasn't alone. At some point in the evening I had to use the restroom. I asked my boyfriend to walk with me after I realized the restroom was outside the dining room and down a long, deserted hallway. He didn't want to wait right outside the women's room door, but he waited near the entrance to the hallway. So I was in there, alone, just my luck no one else had to use the restroom. I went into the second of two stalls and did my thing, and suddenly the hairs on the back of my neck began standing up. I didn't hear anything, it was just a feeling, so I told myself that I was just being paranoid because of the dark, scary hallway, and I'd psych myself out. Still, I was very relieved when a minute later someone else came into the restroom, and I was no longer alone. She went into the other stall, and I came out of mine and washed my hands. That's when I noticed there was no one in the other stall. The door was resting open as it had been, clearly empty. There was nowhere else anyone could go in the small restroom. Yet I'd heard all the noises, the outside door squeaking open and closed, footsteps, and someone closing and locking the stall door right next to me. Yet I was completely alone. Heart beating out of my chest, I ran out of there, down the hall, and into my boyfriend's arms. Months later I learned that the women's restroom was one of the most haunted places in the building. I'm glad I hadn't known that before I went in there, or I never would have been able to relieve myself. This next story happened in a house I'd bought with that same boyfriend. It was a small house built in the 40s. There was nothing creepy about the house, but it wasn't long before we had some strange little things happen. I heard a man clear his throat behind me when I was home alone. Some items I'd put on the floor and leaned up against the wall got knocked over. Little things like that. But the weirdest thing that happened to me in that house was the knocks. They always seemed to happen when I was home alone. In whatever room I was, there were two loud knocks on the window. It sounded exactly like someone outside came up to the window and knocked on it, always two good loud raps. The first time, I was lying in bed one morning, and I heard two knocks on my bedroom window, a quick knock knock. The thing is, my bedroom was in the very back of the house facing the backyard. And the backyard was not accessible except from inside the house. It was a fully fenced, very long backyard, and anyone who came from the street in front couldn't get to it because it was a very narrow passage that we'd blocked to keep anyone out. I'd been awake when it happened, so I got out of bed and went to the window to see who it could have possibly been. Of course there was no one there. There was no one anywhere in the backyard. The next time it happened I was in the kitchen, home alone again, and there were two raps on the kitchen window. It was daytime again, and our kitchen faced the carport. Of course there was nobody there. After a few more times, I told my boyfriend and my older son about it. Neither of them believed me. They teased me about it, saying I kept dreaming that people were knocking on the windows. So one day, while I was taking a shower, the knocks happened right on the shower window. It was so close to me and so unexpected, I actually jumped. This time I was not home alone, so I thought maybe my boyfriend or my son was playing a joke on me, so I kind of laughed it off. I knew it would be hard to get to that window, though, because it faced the blocked, narrow side of the house, and right outside of it were rose bushes with thorns. Later they both swore they hadn't done it. They were very serious, and I could tell they were telling the truth. They also said they had not heard the knocks, so they still didn't believe me. Only one time do I remember it happening at night. This time I was in the third bedroom that we used as an office, in the back of the house. It also faced the inaccessible backyard, and it was late and dark. My curtains were closed, and I was doing something on the computer. When the two loud knocks hit that window, I was too scared to look out the curtains. This only went on for a few months, but it happened a lot, and every time it occurred in whatever room I happened to be in at the time. I never heard it from another room. No one else heard it either. Until one night. On this night I had gone to bed, and my boyfriend and my son were in the living room watching a movie. The next day they told me that at about 1 a.m. they heard two quick loud knocks on the living room window. There was no knock on the front door, which was right next to the window. They looked out the window, and of course no one was there. It finally happened to someone else, in a room that I did not happen to be in. And they finally believed me. I usually don't believe in the paranormal. I'm very skeptical about the subject, but I just can't explain this crying I hear outside. Okay, context. Yesterday I was in my living room watching TV with my family. As I was watching the TV, I heard crying, a woman's cry. The cry sounded like it was coming from outside, right next to my house. So I went out to check my front lawn, but no one was there at all. Went to check the streets as well, and no one was there at all. My little sister heard it as well. And it wasn't coming from the TV because the video was some nature documentary. And I've also heard the same cry not too long ago. I heard the same cry when I was alone in my living room, like a couple of weeks back. Whatever it was sobbing. I thought nothing much of it. I thought it might be an owl or a cat. My mom also heard the same cry multiple times as well. There's this abandoned house right next to my home, it's probably coming from there. I don't believe in ghosts, but I might soon. Don't really know where to start, but here goes. We recently moved house. We've been looking for years, and this place was actually a fair price. Yes, it needed redecorating, the previous people smoked inside, but nothing major, so a bargain, right? Well, it started by hearing footsteps upstairs. My hubby and I joked about it being haunted and put it down to the neighbors. Maybe it just sounds like it's above our heads, when in reality it's just next door in their house upstairs, so this goes on for months and becomes the norm. Well, the next door neighbor went away a few days ago, but the footsteps continue. Summertime rolled around, a good few months ago. I'm the type of person who feels the heat, usually I'll get the fans out on full blast. Well, not in this house, it's constantly cool. I even needed a jumper this summer. Another odd thing. The smell of toast. At night we randomly smell toast, this happens around once a week. After a while I googled it, and apparently it could mean an electrical fault / dust on your pipes. So we get the plumber / electrician round, family friend, and everything checks out. We also smelled TCP one night in the hallway. While I was finishing cleaning, I found a small hotel card on my sofa. I'd literally just tidied, there's no way I would have missed it. So I take a photo and send it to my husband. He responds to me and says he'll look into it. Came back 5 minutes later and said it's a Spanish hotel that was demolished 10 years ago. So we're stumped on that one. A few weeks ago hubby and I were watching TV in bed. He went to the toilet and came back to bed looking pale. I ask what's wrong. He lets out a deep breath and says, something ran at me. I asked what he meant, and he said, I came out of the toilet, and in the corner of my eye, it looked like a figure ran at me. This place is ducking haunted. He doesn't believe in ghosts either, so hearing him say that sent chills down my spine. But we put it down to eyes playing tricks / illusion / light trickery. Anything but ghosts, basically. Last week my children came screaming down the stairs with a look of pure terror on their faces. They're 8 and 6, my 8-year-old says, someone was knocking on the door. Where is Dad? Dad was at the shops, and the door unlocked itself. I calmed them down and asked them to show me what they mean. So we all head upstairs, and my 8-year-old demonstrates and shows me the lock. I suggested that maybe it wasn't locked properly, and maybe the knocking was a rat in the loft. I don't know what else to suggest at this point. Oh, I almost forgot about this one. A few months ago I was sitting in bed and heard creaking behind me on the top of the stairs. You know when someone's deliberately making a floorboard squeak by moving pressure from one leg to the other? Ek eek ek eek ek eek for about 40 seconds it was constantly squeaking. My children like to play a spy game, so I assumed it was one of them. I smiled and said, I know you're there. The squeaking ceased, but I got no response. So I get up to go and talk to them, and they're not there, they're downstairs. We're still in contact with the people who used to live here. Sometimes we'll get each other's post, so one of us will drop it off to the other. They're friendly enough, and often we'll have a small chat. Well, I jokingly said, don't suppose you had any strange happenings while you were there, not haunted or anything, and started laughing. Her face dropped, and she said, no, of course not. Anyway, I've got a pot on the stove, better make sure it's not boiling over. Take care. And shut the door abruptly. More information, we have a dog who hates everyone apart from us. He's not bothered by the house. I thought animals were supposed to be more in tune with paranormal stuff. It's just weird at this point, half of my brain is screaming ghosts, and the other half thinks there must be a logical explanation. I don't know anymore. I technically don't believe in ghosts, but I worked at a small bar and grill for a few years. While working, You were the only employee. The only ways in or out were the front door and the west door. The bar had an alarm system that also made both of the doors cause a loud beep behind the bar when opened. The bar was centered with the front door, and the bathroom was on the east side of the room. If you come in or out either door, you walk past the bar. The place was old, and the bathroom did not have a typical door. It was more of plywood on hinges with a spring, so every time someone went in or out, it would slap pretty loud. One afternoon, it was very slow, it was just a regular and I had done all my day prep, so we were just talking. While we are talking, the front door opens, it beeps, a guy walks in and heads to the bathroom, we hear the door slap, and we think nothing of it. Folks go to the bathroom before ordering all the time. So the customer and I are talking, and we notice the guy has not come out of the bathroom. So after about 20 minutes, the customer says, "Should you go check on that guy?" So I do. And there is no one in the bathroom. There is no window. There is no other door. A person would have to hold the bathroom door on purpose and then walk past us without us noticing, and then the door that always beeps would have to fail. We freaked out because the dude just vanished. It felt as if there was a portal in our bathroom. This is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Okay, I know this is going to sound like another cliché ghost story, but I promise you this is the absolute most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me, and it is 100% true. Also, a little background on me, I'm not very religious, but I do believe there are spirits out there and things that we cannot explain. I am currently 23, and this happened to me when I was 16. It was me, my mom, my stepdad, and my two sisters. My older sister was 13, and my youngest was 10. My parents were building their dream home, and we were all living in an apartment while the house was being built. The apartment complex was really nice and was in a great area. I remember the day we moved into the apartment, we were all unpacking our boxes and trying to get everything organized. What really stood out to me about the apartment was how white the carpet was. The whole apartment was carpeted except the kitchen and bathrooms. This will come into play later in the story. So, about 2 weeks later, we're all settled and unpacked. The day went on as usual. I remember it was time for bed, and my oldest sister did not want to go. She kept coming up with excuses to stay up. I never really thought anything of it, and eventually my mom made her go to her room. Later that night I woke up to the sound of something rattling. It was coming from my sister's room. I ease out of bed and slowly walked to my sister's room. I opened the door, and the noise stopped. Maybe I'm just tired and hearing things, I thought. I remember walking back to my room and how cold it was. It's the middle of the summer in the south, and it's at least 80 to 90 degrees at night. Our thermostat reads 64 even though the air was set on 70. I shrugged it off and just went back to bed. The next day I went out with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. I left at about 11 p.m. and did not return home until midnight. After my girlfriend dropped me off, I unlocked the apartment door and saw my sister sitting on the couch. She said, "Hey, when did you go outside?" I was confused. I said, I just got home. I've been with Casey all day." She looked at me like she just saw a ghost. "Eric, that's impossible. I just talked to you in your room." I just stood there, not knowing what to say. "Yeah, you were sitting on your bed just staring into the dark closet, and I asked you what you were doing, and you said nothing, so I just left you alone." This really scared me, but I didn't show it. I just told my sister to stop messing around, and I went to my room. When I opened my door, the closet was open and the light was off. I just turned on the TV and finally went to sleep at about 3 a.m. A couple weeks passed, and one night my sister and I were up playing the Nintendo Wii. It was around midnight. She went to the kitchen and filled up a glass full of Dr. Pepper. She walked out of the kitchen and stopped. She dropped the whole glass of Dr. Pepper onto the solid white carpet and was staring down the hallway right behind me. What the hell?" I yelled. "Why did you do that? Mom is going to kill you." She did not say a word. She turned to look at me and said, "Eric, there's a man looking over your shoulder." At that very moment, my blood ran cold, and I was overcome with dread. I could feel something there. I turned to look, and there was nothing. I was so scared. I knew she wasn't lying now because I felt whatever this thing was. We cleaned up the soda, and we both went to sleep in the living room with the lamp on. My sister told me that when she would take a shower and the mirrors would fog up, she would see a little girl write "help me" on the mirror. "Okay, you convinced me the other night, but come on, I'm not that gullible." My sister did not smile, smirk, or anything. She was as serious as she could be. That next week, my parents went to a funeral and brought my two sisters with them. I had the whole place to myself. I call up my girlfriend and invite her over, but I tell her to wait until I get out of the shower. I hop in the shower, and about 10 minutes into it, it seemed like the lights dimmed a little. I felt this dread again, the same thing I felt the other night. I could see this man now. He had gray skin, a black beard, and bright red eyes. I could see him in the corner of my eye. I got so scared I just turned the shower off. I still had soap in my hair and everything. I grabbed the towel and wiped the soap from my eyes. I swear to you, when I looked at the mirror, the words "help me" were written across it. I freaked out, got dressed, called my girlfriend, and demanded she come get me now. I tried telling my girlfriend everything, but she was not superstitious. She thought I was trying to scare her. I did not want to go home that night, but my parents gave me no choice even after I told them what happened. That night, I tossed and turned trying to go to sleep. It was not working. I was wide awake thinking about what happened earlier that day. As I lay in my bed, I heard that rattling noise again coming from my sister's room. I got out of bed and opened her door, but this time, the rattling continued. It was coming from her closet. I opened the closet, and there was a shattered mirror lying on the ground. I remember I put that mirror in there when we moved in, but it was not broken. How could it have broken? Even if the mirror had fallen, it would have landed on the carpet, and since it was cheap and weighed only about 2 pounds, its weight should not have caused it to break. I woke my sister up and told her what was going on. She told me that she had been hearing that same noise for the past month but was too scared to investigate. Everything kind of calmed down after that. The day finally came. That was the day we finally moved out of that awful apartment and into our new home. I remember how happy I was packing my stuff up. We got everything loaded into the U-Haul, and we left, not wanting to look back. I specifically placed all of my electronics in a separate box. We got to the new house, and my phone was almost dead. I go to that box and start looking for my phone charger. Then, I remembered my sister was using it while we were packing. Damn it. I asked my girlfriend to bring me back to the apartment to get my phone charger. We went, and this was the first time she had been inside. I opened the door, and she had a blank expression. She told me to get the charger so we can get the hell out of here. I was just as ready as she was, so I got it, and we left. I remember to this day the coldness you felt when you walked in that place. Thank you for listening. I have some other paranormal stories, but that's for another day. You never really believe until it happens to you. This happened in early February of 2005 in Concord, VA. Like my title, I wasn't a true believer until I saw what I saw. Even though it was almost 20 years ago, it's something I think about often. It literally changed my whole life in the matter of 5 seconds. Since then I have become somewhat sensitive to things I can only explain as the supernatural. So let me set the scene. I was a super young mother to my first daughter, who would turn 1 later that month. We used to live on this old curvy road where one end brings you to Lynchburg and the other to Appomattox. Like every morning back then, I was heading to Lynchburg, but of course I was speeding to make it on time to work for 5 a.m. There was this part of the trip where it had super sharp curves that were snake-like, with an uphill at the end of the snake. There would always be huge packs of deer in this area, so you literally go 5 miles an hour with all the curviness. This strip of road didn't have any houses for at least 3 miles each way. Even though it was 20 years ago, I still remember every single little detail, like the outside temp was 17 degrees and Usher's Confessions Part 2 was on the radio with the time being 4:43 a.m. I remember the vanilla tree car freshener. Bro, I even remember what underwear I had on. I am sorry, but it's just nuts I even remember that stuff. I was speeding until I got to the top of the snake and slowed to a basic crawl, but as I was entering the top of the snake, Usher started coming in and out of the speakers while my whole dash was slowly dimming. Of course I had a mini panic attack thinking my car was dying but was confused because I still had plenty of power when I stepped on the gas. By the second curve, I got the most intense feeling I've ever had in my life at this point. I can only explain it as pain, sadness, fear, coldness, and just the feeling of being lost. All I could do was bawl my eyes out. Like a full-grown woman crying like a baby. And as I reached my last curve before the uphill, I saw him. I saw him leaning against the hill that was right next to the road. I first noticed his bare feet with his gray tattered pants. Wait, it's the middle of the winter, where are his shoes? Was my first thought. But then I saw his gray, thin, strange jacket, one I've never seen one like before in my life. As I slowly turned my gaze to his face, I realized he didn't have a face but rather just a shadow. I literally could make out every other detail but his face, it was just gone. You know how if you're going slow enough and you hit your brakes, the red glow can see what's behind you in the mirrors? Well, this guy was just gone, and so were all those emotions I had 2 seconds ago. I made it to work, being only 2 minutes late. That day after work I decided to walk around the downtown Lynchburg historical building, something I've never done in the 5 months I worked there. That was the day I learned what the Civil War soldiers actually looked like and discovered my road was used as a trail to Appomattox. I also had no clue when a soldier would die, they would steal anything useful off the fallen soldiers. I know what I saw that day, and I can't tell who or what side that soldier came from because even though I thought I saw the color gray, it was really just a ghost, and do they even really have colors? I did a Ouija, and it didn't go well. I know a lot of people here are skeptics, atheists, etc., but this doesn't pretend to affirm or deny anything. I'm just sharing my story, and I can totally hear everyone's opinions. Surely there's a rational explanation for everything. Maybe there isn't. But at least the story is there. Context. It all starts in 2019, and for context, at this point, I am 18, have just entered further study in a medium-sized town in the east of France. My degree is not at all common, so there are only about 10 people in my year. I quickly made friends with 2 people. 2 boys, one a year older than me and the other a few years older. We got on really well, and in the space of a few weeks, we already felt like we'd known each other for years. We discussed every conceivable subject. The subject of beliefs and the paranormal soon came up. I was brought up in an atheist family, but that doesn't mean I'm an atheist. I was more into spiritual research because the subject really fascinated me, and I felt a need to delve into it. My other 2 friends, let's call them Antoine, 19, and Kareem, 23, were also on a spiritual path, but Antoine already seemed more interested in the question as long as we saw him as advanced. He talked about shamanism and other New Age beliefs. As I didn't yet have a fixed idea about these things, I was impressed. The gift. As we talked about it all, we were tempted to try an experiment. Antoine's birthday was coming up, and Kareem decided to give him a Ouija board. That evening we decided to get into the spirit of things at Antoine's house by turning out the lights, closing the shutters, and lighting candles. It was a first for all of us, and I was particularly intrigued by it. I was obviously well versed in horror films and what went on in them, but deep down I thought it wasn't going to work. However, very quickly, the drop began to move on the board. Somewhat surprised, I remained silent, and Antoine did the same. Kareem, for his part, took the lead and asked several fairly basic questions. Who are you? What's your name? Etc. I should point out that despite my skepticism about the practice, we did things respectfully and without laughing as some people might do. We were polite, etc. As time went by, my skepticism grew, and I said that it must be ideomotor, our unconscious moving the drop, etc. Kareem suggested that I remove my fingers and ask questions that only I could answer. Quickly and stupidly, I asked to speak to someone in my family. Something seemed to come up. I ask who it is, and immediately a letter appears, then another and another, until a first name is formed, that of my grandfather, who had died 2 years earlier. My blood runs cold because I've never mentioned him to my friends. To be sure, I keep asking more and more specific questions that I'm sure Antoine and Kareem have absolutely no answers to. Everything fits. Confused, we end the session. Immediately afterwards, I feel exhausted. I went home that evening and slept like a log. We had more sessions, but the further we went, the more cynical, imprecise, and often mocking the answers became. I was beginning to wonder if we weren't being played. Because yes, at that point I was convinced that we were really talking to someone via the board. My behavior after the sessions. More and more, things started to go wrong for me. Once, after a session, I almost threw up because I felt such an excruciating tightness in my chest. I became irritated and nasty to my friends. A few months later, Kareem told me that one day in class I'd spoken to him in a terribly nasty way and that he'd been genuinely hurt by my behavior. I have absolutely no memory of it. I had a lot of mood swings, and people close to me really wondered what was going on with me. For me, I was thinking about the stress of studying and, above all, the thought of something irrational in my life. Even someone who doesn't really believe in all that will start to feel strange things in their life, be afraid of dark places, and so on. It's quite a human reaction. You don't believe it, but you at least think about it. These events lasted about 2 years, with fluctuations. Sometimes it was very strong, and sometimes it was more or less calm. But there were also external factors in these behaviors that I still can't explain. External events. One during a session in my home this time, Kareem had asked for a physical manifestation of the entity we were talking to, and several bangs of different intensities were heard in my wall. There is no neighbor behind the wall. 2 on another occasion, during a session, a question whose title I can no longer remember was asked, and the answer was death. Just then, the candle we had on a piece of furniture went out. That same candle lit up again immediately at the end of the session. It may seem incredible, but it was all filmed by Kareem, who wanted to keep a record of these sessions. Even though I don't speak to Kareem anymore, for other reasons, the video must still exist in the memory of his phone if he hasn't deleted it. 3. Outside the sessions, I often saw small shadows moving very quickly in the corner of my eye in specific places in my flat. I should point out that when I was young I had already seen shadows moving very quickly between two hedges, and I recently learned that my father had seen something similar too. Anyway, these visions didn't happen in the evening but rather in the early afternoon. For my window looked out onto a moderately busy street, and I was doing some housework in the afternoon when I saw a woman in white staring at me from the street. Half a second later, she had disappeared. 5. Some time later, I was taking my bins down to my cellar, very gloomy, so that didn't help, and as I was leaving the premises, I saw a man on my left, in front of another door. I turned to greet him, thinking he was a neighbor, but nothing. The man was wearing a hat. It was only after some research that I learned of the existence of the Hat Man. 6. As I was eating while watching a series, the bread on my left jumped 10 centimeters before falling back onto the table in the same place. I thought it was an earthquake, but nothing else had moved. When I told my friends about the jumping bread, nobody believed me, and they obviously laughed at me. 7. I lived in my flat for 5 years and went through 2 relationships fairly quickly. My ex once woke me up in a panic because she'd seen the bathroom door open by itself. Another ex saw the same thing and told me she didn't understand and that, despite being a very rational soul, she'd been confused. I should point out that there were no windows open. What's more, the door to my bathroom closed by itself, probably because of the incline in the floor, but in the cases where my exes had seen the door, it was the other way round. In other words, you had to push it. 8. One evening, on my way home, the empty water bottle I'd put next to the bin fell over and rolled to my feet. Well, that's easy to explain. I must have moved something that made the wind blow, and plastic without contents is very light, which explains the movement. 9. My ex and I were cooking, and the television was on. It was a cheap TV, and the remote control didn't work very well. You had to be really in front of the TV to increase the sound or change channels. The remote control was on the kitchen table, so not in front of the TV at all, but the sound increased drastically, so much so that I asked my ex to stop, thinking she was turning up the sound. She didn't have the remote control in her hand. The next day, the same thing happened, but the sound increased more episodically, as if someone had pressed the button several times and wasn't holding it down. 10. Kareem and I went to a church, and he sat in the front row. After a while, I decided to leave the church and go and sit on a low wall facing the wide open door of the building. I can still see Kareem with his back to me, sitting in the front row. Suddenly, a noise drew my attention to the right, and I looked around for a few seconds, then looked back at the church and saw Kareem coming out. I asked him how he could have gotten out so quickly. He told me that when he heard me coming out, he got up too. In short, I should have seen him walk towards the exit, but he didn't. There was obviously no one in the room. There was obviously no one in the church apart from us. 11. One evening after an evening out with Kareem, he was leaving my house to go home when he called me and told me to come downstairs. When I went to look, I saw a rosary on the doorstep. He told me he'd called me straight away, having almost stepped on it on the way out. 2 weeks later, I got home, and on my doormat, the door to my flat this time, was another wooden rosary. I took it with me and still have it. To cut a long story short, I had a Ouija and thought I was going mad for 2 years. Despite periods of calm, the events kept coming back. I swore I'd never do that again, or any other form of divination, spiritualism, etc. I did many of the things I needed to do to stop the manifestations. With time, Antoine stopped studying and went back to his native region, and I stopped talking to Kareem. Today, I'm closer to Christianity, and I haven't really had anything as disturbing as I used to. Once again, this is just one experience among many, and I don't claim to hold any truth. Some will say I'm paranoid, ridiculous, crazy, or whatever, but I just think I made a mistake putting my fingers on that board. If I have one piece of advice to give you, it's to never touch it, whether you believe in it or not. This one isn't really that scary, but it still creeps me out. When I was 11 to 12, I'm 15 now, I made the stupid decision of playing the Charlie challenge. It started out innocently with me just asking questions like, does X have a crush on me? And am I going to die a virgin? All that stupidity, but at the time I didn't know that you had to burn the paper after you finished, so I just threw it away like an idiot, and that's where things got interesting. 2 days later, a lot of roaches started showing up at our house, which was pretty strange considering that we live in a pretty cold area and we basically never get roaches. That night, After Mom and I finished praying, we are a religious family, I remember seeing figures around the house, but I didn't pay much attention because I wasn't wearing my glasses, so I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. So I go to bed, and I start seeing those figures again, like just big black shadows. My room was pretty dark since I didn't have any windows, but this time it felt a little out of the ordinary. 5 minutes go by, and I don't see anything anymore, so I just fall asleep and have the worst nightmare of my life that I still remember to this day. It was just a really black face with red eyes just staring at me. Just imagine a pitch black face and bright red eyes, that must have gone on for like 2 hours, or at least it felt like it, and then the dream switched. I remember seeing a creepy version of my house, which was full of roaches, with me sleeping right there in my own bed. I was then woken up by a poster falling in my room. It made a decently loud noise, and I just rushed to my mom's room crying. She's a single parent. I stormed in and told Mom what happened. She comforted me and told me it was just a bad dream, and she let me sleep next to her. A few days go by without anything happening, and I basically get over it. Then it happened again. It was a Friday night after a long day at school and football training, soccer for all you Americans, and I just dropped dead into my bed exhausted without praying or brushing my teeth. A few hours of sleep go by, and I remember something really cold on my back. I'm a chest sleeper. It felt like someone got ice out of the freezer and just dropped it on my back. Nothing happens for another 30 minutes, and suddenly I hear the TV on. At first I just ignored it because I thought it was my brain playing, but then I realized that the TV was actually on. I go over and check, but no one is there. At this point I started to freak out, so I just turned off the TV and rushed to my room. I lie down and fall asleep, but I remember waking up in my mom's bed. I asked her if she moved me, but she said no. I started to freak out because I remembered about the paper I didn't burn, but I didn't tell Mom because I didn't want her to freak out. Nothing else has happened since, apart from me having a cross in my room and a mini statue of the Virgin Mary. I don't believe in ghosts, but I saw one. This was my first paranormal experience ever. I was 14 years old, and my family and I went to a house in a very secluded place. It was my aunt's house back then, and almost everyone in my family was there. My aunt has an adopted daughter because the real mother died when the daughter was a baby, and I never knew it until this day. I was sitting on a chair with my laptop, and 2 other people were sitting on my side, doing their things. Then, a woman, she was a friend of my aunt, showed up and took a photo of us. Behind us, there was a window, and behind the window, a balcony. When they looked at that picture, they saw a woman on the side of the balcony, behind the window, as if she was looking directly at the camera, but her eyes could not be seen because there was a bar on the window that covered up the eyes of that woman. Initially, I thought the image was a reflection from the TV, and it turned out to be one. The next day, my parents went to the house to see that photo, and when I showed it to them, my mother said, "It looks like the biological mother of that adopted daughter." That really scared me at the time. Later, my aunt came and asked if my parents had seen the picture. When my mother told her that the woman resembled a deceased person they had known a long time ago, my aunt agreed. And I swear on my life they weren't in communication and did not see the picture before or have a conversation before that moment. And not only did they think like this, but everyone who knew the family said the same thing. It was really scary to me. I'd never believed in ghosts until I saw a real one. I've never believed in ghosts, but I think my house may have one. My 33-year-old female husband, 30-year-old male, and I live in a beautifully restored 100-year-old craftsman home in the oldest neighborhood of Houston, Texas. We have lived here for about 3 years and in this time have experienced odd occurrences that we are unable to explain, list below. Until today, we would joke that it must be a ghost but never really believed it, but now it seems possible. What do you guys think? Is there a way we can test the energy of our home or something? I feel silly asking that, but what should we do? 1. About 2 months after moving into the house, I was in our upstairs guest room, and our large, 7 feet tall, heavy wooden frame, maybe 75-ish pounds, mirror, which was securely leaning on the wall, fell on top of me and pinned me against the bed. Thank goodness my husband was home to help me get out from under it. I wasn't hurt, but I felt really confused because I was just walking by, and in the past, unlearning this behavior required a lot of muscle. 2. On 2 occasions with different guests staying in the same guest room as the mirror from the previous story, maybe 9-ish months apart, they have told me while they were wide awake they felt like someone sat on the bed / the cat jumped on the bed, only to realize they were alone in the room. 3. While I was outside gardening this past fall, I felt someone firmly push my back, which caused me to stumble. I was certain as I was turning around there was going to be someone there, but I was alone. My husband thinks I simply lost my balance, but I felt something touch my back. I didn't bump into anything, it was clear behind me. 4. This brings us to today, which for me is the hardest to ignore. This morning around 7 a.m. I heard 2 thuds about 10 minutes apart. After the second thud, I arose to let my dog out, as the noise had also awakened him. While he was outside, I examined the source of the sound. The cat was in our bedroom asleep with my husband, and there wasn't anyone else in the house. I briefly looked around downstairs and didn't see anything, so I assumed it must have been something outside, got my dog, and went back to sleep. Fast forward to around 7 p.m., I went upstairs to get my stepson's 10 bedroom ready for his arrival. His dad was picking him up, he is with us every other weekend, and I found 3 of his books had fallen off of his bookshelf. I believe this was the series of thuds I heard this morning. Here are a few details that make this situation particularly strange. A. The books were a series of 4, I had organized them in order when I placed them 2 weeks ago. Books 1, 2, and 4 had fallen, and the third book remained perfectly intact and erect on the bookshelf. B. They fell in at least 2 series minutes apart, not all at once. C. They fell pretty far out from the bookshelf. As a former physics major, I am certain it would have taken quite a bit of force to get them to land as far away as they did, and nothing had fallen behind where they were on the shelf that could have knocked them. D. For those who are curious, the bookshelf is securely anchored to the wall and has many books and knickknacks that did not appear to be moved. The books also have about an inch of clearance between them and the edge of the shelf. This is strange, right? I and a friend went camping in 2023. Not a super rural or notable location. Only about a mile or 2 down a creek from a back road. We settled in at our spot and had brought a cooler for beer. We also had a fire lit naturally. Starting around 9 p.m., small twigs started flying at us out of the darkness. At first we thought it was one of us pranking the other, but it just kept going in random intervals while we were right next to each other. As we sat there shining our flashlights, we began to feel uneasy as the twigs transformed into sticks. While they weren't strong enough to cause significant damage, they could still hurt if thrown with enough force. At this point we got up and searched the surrounding area with lights to see if it was someone, something, throwing stuff at us. I even checked in the treetops for good measure. Nothing. When we came back, the water bottles that had been sitting next to us were flung into the surrounding darkness. We were incredibly spooked by then and told each other we'd go back after we waited a bit longer to see what would happen. This was a turning point. Whatever it was seemed to lose its patience and slam the cooler my friend was sitting on. I knew for a fact it wasn't him because his arms were in his lap and his feet were both out and forward. That was when we decided to leave. When we walked downhill into the creek bed, we had put the fire out as best we could and looked back. We could hear brush noises like someone kicking up leaves would sound. We hustled back to the car and almost stepped on a copperhead. Right when we got to the road, I turned back to my friend. As I did so, a branch the size of a burly man's forearm sailed past my friend's or just inches from him. We started running uphill after that. As we neared the hilltop, under the creek bridge, a Bud Light beer bottle levitated up and flew away into one of the rock pillars holding the bridge. Like positively exploded in front of me. We got in the car and could hear/feel hitting noises against various parts of it but saw nothing. We drove off and stayed away that night. The next morning when it was light, I drove alone to the bridge and waited. Small pebbles would intermittently sort of shoot up into the sky from below in the creek onto the road where I was standing. Not nearly as aggressive but eerie. Of interest, I've also found a well-preserved Native American arrowhead there. This has never happened since or before, and the only time it happened was when I tried to stay overnight or in the dark in that creek. Demon in the window. Okay, so I've had paranormal stuff happen to me throughout my life, starting when I was about 4 years old, and it's happened in all the different places I've lived, not just in one house. I've moved around quite a bit, and in every single house I've lived in, there has been activity. So I think maybe I am just sensitive to feeling and seeing things. A few times I wasn't the only one to see them either. So the first thing I remember was living at my mom's grandma's house, so my great-grandma, whom I called Granny, where I lived until I was 6, and I would see strange faces in the mirrors and even in the front of the microwave door, any kind of reflective surface, but it was weird because I would see my own reflection as well as another face, so I know I wasn't just getting scared at my own reflection. They never scared me, and I never really saw anything else at that house. But at the same time, I also stayed at my other grandmother's house on weekends. My mom and dad were divorced at this time, so I went back and forth. But at my other grandmother's house, which was my dad's mom's, when I was 4 years old, I went to bed with her, and we slept in the same bed together, and at the head of the bed was a window that faced the backyard, which was only about maybe 20 feet until it hit a small section of woods and then the creek, a pretty deep creek that you couldn't walk through, You would have to swim across it to come into our backyard from that way. So anyway, we had just gone to bed, and my grandmother was already asleep, but I was lying awake talking to myself. I had insomnia even as a child. I distinctly recall feeling an impulse to look through the blinds covering the window. I sensed that there was something present beyond them. So I just pulled them apart and looked, and there was something there, just outside the window, looking straight at me. I stared at it for a bit. I remember feeling like I couldn't look away, and even at only 4 years old, I remember just feeling a complete sense of absolute terror. This creature was entirely black, but I could clearly see that it was wearing some kind of strange, unfamiliar clothing. Its face appeared dark, as if in shadow, yet its eyes resembled black holes within that shadow. Like there were no eyes, just deep holes where they should have been. The mouth was a huge, gaping smile filled with horrible, sharp teeth. In our side yard, there was a tall streetlight that illuminated the far end of the backyard. However, due to the position of the window and the proximity of this creature to the window, it remained just out of reach of the light, casting a shadow in the corner of the trailer, while the light behind it created an outline against the yard. I mean, this thing terrified me. I finally was able to pull my eyes away from this face and let the blinds shut and woke up my grandmother and told her there was something out there. She looked but didn't see anything. So the next morning I was insistent that I had seen something. So my dad, this was his mother's house, and he lived there at the time, and my uncle, who also still lived there, said, well, maybe it was a neighbor being an idiot or something, and they both went out to the backyard by the window and looked. The ground was wet, as it had been raining off and on for the last few days, and they said if someone had been there, they would have known because the ground was more dirt and mud than grass, but they said they could find no evidence on the ground of someone walking back there. And they told me I had been imagining it. Of course I was used to seeing things no one else saw, and they never frightened me, but this thing scared me so horribly bad that I literally was terrified for years of looking out windows at night, and I kept every single window closed and covered. Even to this day, I keep my bedroom window covered in black plastic and taped over so there's no chance of seeing out or in it, and I'm 32 years old now with my child. That thing was real, I know it was. Years later, I brought up the incident to my dad and asked if he remembered it. He then shared something he had never told anyone else at the time because he didn't want to scare us. He said there were definitely no footprints in the wet mud, indicating that no human had been back there, but he did find hand and fingerprint marks on the window, suggesting that something had been leaning against it, looking through, just like I had described. We never spoke of the incident again. Then about 3 years later I was living with my mom and stepdad in a little house, and there was definitely something in there too, but this one was never frightening, and actually I think it saved our lives from a fire one night. In the bathroom the mirror was right next to the door, and when you stood at the sink looking into it, you could look straight down the hallway toward the place where the hallway made a T, and at each end of the top of the T was one bedroom. And when you looked through the mirror, there was a human-shaped mist that would walk back and forth. And even from the living room at the bottom of the T-shaped hall, you could look down toward the bedrooms and see this sparkly-looking mist. It seemed to stay down by the bedrooms. I never saw it anywhere else. But my mom had a bunch of perfume bottles on her dresser, and she was OCD about them being in the exact same place, and there was enough dust buildup around them that you could tell where they should be. So she would leave them at their places and go to work, and when she got home, they would all be moved around. She would get so pissed and even thought I was doing it until she realized that they had done it even when I was over at my dad's for the weekend. So we just got used to it. Then one night, my stepdad had fallen asleep watching TV on the couch, while my mom and I were both in our beds. Now the way our hallway was, there was only one way in and out of the bedrooms, down that long hallway, and for whatever reason all the windows in our house had those bars on them, the kind people put on their windows when they live in a bad area. Well, right at the beginning of the long hallway was the kitchen and a closet with our hot water heater. So apparently sometime in the middle of the night, my stepdad was shaken awake by something, but he kept ignoring it and trying to go back to sleep. Well, after a few small shakes didn't work, whatever was doing it shook him so hard it actually knocked him off the couch onto the floor, and he stood up like, WTF. Then he started smelling smoke, and he turned on the living room light and saw massive amounts of smoke coming out around the closet door where the hot water heater was at. He got a towel because the doorknob was too hot to touch, and he opened the door, and the water heater was completely on fire. Thank God we had a fire extinguisher, and he managed to put it out. If that entity hadn't shaken him off the couch and woken him up at that moment, the fire would have soon spread through the closet door and across the hallway, which was the only exit from the 2 bedrooms where my mom and I were sleeping, as we couldn't escape through the windows due to the bars. So we would have died for sure if the fire had gotten any bigger than it did. So we didn't live there much longer, and needless to say, I'm very terrified of dying in a fire, but I wouldn't even be here now if that entity hadn't woken my stepdad up when it did. I had lots more experiences growing up as a child, but they were mostly just little things here and there, like seeing orbs in pics I took or smelling cigars when no one in my house smoked them, or dead family members' perfumes, things like that. But I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on that scary, black, shadowy, sharp-toothed, no eyes, evil-looking thing I saw out my window as a child. It scared me so bad that it literally traumatized me to where I still have nightmares about it. But I'm not really sure what it could have been, maybe a demon or one of the black-eyed entities? I heard those black-eyed things are mostly kids, though, and this thing was more like a huge adult-sized thing. I mean, those windows on that trailer are too high up for even an adult to put their face on the glass like that thing had done. My dad had to stretch up to see the hand marks left on the window, and he's the average adult male height. I mean, maybe someone who was taller than 6 feet 6 inches could maybe have looked right in the window, but still, there were no footprints or marks of any kind on the ground, and I can tell you for sure that face was not human. No human can make their mouth smile like that, almost like the corners of the mouth came way up, almost halfway to the ears, and the mouth had a weird, irregular shape to it. And all those teeth. No human has that many teeth in their mouth. It literally is freaking me out right now even remembering this thing to write about it. I've tried to suppress the memory of it, but I just can't get rid of it. I can still see it just as clearly now in my mind as I could then in person. But if anyone can help me out with some thoughts on this, that would be great. I feel that if I had a better understanding of what I could have become and what the entity wanted from me, I might find some peace of mind. I can tell you that I was never comfortable at my grandmother's house again. After she died, my dad took over the place, and I even moved in with him for a few months. During that time, which was just in 2013 when I was 28 years old, I was still terrified at nighttime, so much so that I made my boyfriend stay there with me whenever my dad was on call or working and not home. The unknown is always scarier than the known, even when the known is kind of scary. Anyways, sorry this is so long. I have some more things I want to talk about that all happened over the course of a 6-year period when I lived with my ex, and I think they were tied to the house or property he lived on, because as soon as I moved, they stopped, but I'll save those for another day. Tap on the shoulder. I've never believed in ghosts, but I can't rationalize this. The night before last, I decided to sleep on my couch because I was having a hard time falling asleep. TV helps sometimes. My youngest daughter came out to sleep on the other side of the couch, L-shaped, with me around midnight. She sleeps with me most nights because she gets scared in her room. My teenage daughter sleep talks a lot, but this night she kept calling me from her room over and over, just saying mom. But not responding when I said what. The third time she did this, I was already awake, around 3 a.m., and right after, I felt 3 firm taps on my shoulder. I was facing the back of the couch. I assumed it was my little one and said, "What?" No response, then more taps. I ask again, no response, then more taps. This time I turn over and see the hand receding away from me. It was fairly dark, and at this point I thought it was my daughter, but I sat up to look at her and realized that she was sleeping on the opposite side of the couch, out cold. It would have been impossible for it to be her hand, as she was way too far away. I can't make sense of it, and I'm not a spiritual person. If someone told me this exact story 3 days ago, I wouldn't have believed them. I'm not crazy, I've never experienced hallucinations or delusions of any kind. Does anyone know what that was, or have they experienced anything similar? For a decade, I was a paranormal tour guide at an infamous location. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, formerly known as Weston State Hospital, is a Kirkbride building that housed the mentally ill from 1864 to 1994. In 2007, it was privately purchased and has become a museum/historic location and ghost hunting spot. The asylum has a very unpleasant and dark history that I have shared with thousands of people, and it pains me to be considered an expert on the subject. In 2021, I retired from my position as a guide and manager of ghost hunting events, under severe burnout. After all that I experienced there, it solidified in my mind that paranormal things that defy rational explanation do indeed happen, and certain phenomena are absolutely real, electronic voice phenomenon, in particular. It's almost October, and I'm feeling somewhat spooky, so here are a couple of strange things I experienced in my time there. One evening while training for the job, I was on the first floor with a couple of coworkers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were quietly observing the area. Light from outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. In that light, I observed the perfect silhouette of a man walking from left to right, visible from head to hip. I said something about it, and the 3 of us watched as an arm and hand moved into the light from the right. I immediately ran into the room and began looking out of that window for someone outside. There was no one there. At that time, the realization that from the ground to the bottom of the window is like 7 feet didn't even occur to me. I will never forget the crisp, clear silhouette shape for as long as I live. We would run experiments with a spirit box. It rapidly scans radio frequencies and is believed to be a communication device. One person would use one with noise-canceling earbuds. All they're able to hear is the radio static and blips of a few random stations, and when they hear a word or phrase, they are to say it out loud. I always liked this role in the experiment. One evening, my coworker and I ran one of these experiments in a notorious room where a murder took place in 1987. For 10 minutes, I sat and listened to nothing but radio static through the spirit box, no blips of radio, nothing except the ch of the static. Lol, I was starting to get bored when I heard a woman's voice say evil, so I spoke up and repeated the word, evil. Next thing I know, my coworker is shining her flashlight in my face to get my attention. I pull out the earbud, and she was practically frantic, saying, "It's time to go, time to go." We quickly left the room, ran down the hall, and continued to the center section before she finally told me what had happened. While I was hearing nothing but static, she said she kept hearing what sounded like someone shuffling their feet and walking around just outside of the door. She said she spoke up and asked, "Whoever is out in the hallway, are they nice?" That was when I spoke out and said, "Evil." In the wee hours one night, we figured it would be cool to see what would happen if we shut all the doors of the ward. One of the doors, as I was closing it, the knob twisted in my hand. I was not twisting the knobs lol, and was forcibly pulled closed. I stood there for several moments opening/closing that door trying to replicate what happened, trying to explain it. Finally the person with me was like, "What the hell are you doing?" It was so weird. I'd never felt an invisible force like that before. Had 3 people spend the night one night, and they had thermal imaging video. They set it up, pointing down the hall, where we could all watch on a tablet. We thought it would be interesting to leave a device at the far end of the hall that would alarm if the field around it was disturbed. As one of the dudes walked down the hall to put it there, we could see his form on thermal imaging, clearly human-shaped in colors representing heat and warmth. When he walked by one of those doorways about 1/4 way down the ward, the shape of a person's head, neck, shoulders, and upper body in colors indicating cooler temperatures leaned and peeked out as he walked by. Like someone popped out of the room for a sec as he walked by to check him out. I've never seen anything like it, won't forget it. That happened a lot, a guest capturing something far out and not sending a copy to us. I'll end this long-winded account with something that absolutely changed me and that I still don't understand. I remember the exact night and time of these occurrences, that's how profound and somewhat unsettling they were. June 3rd and June 4th of 2017, 3:40 a.m. On June 3rd, after about an hour of hearing a female voice, one instance even sounded like she called my name, along with banging noises and the sound of footsteps, specifically, running sounds on the hardwood floor toward us. I sat quietly on the floor with a group. I began to experience dizziness, lightheadedness, and a sense of nausea. I reassured myself that it was merely my imagination and that I would be okay. A few minutes later, I started to feel this intense burning sensation on my lower back, just to the right of my spine. Again, I told myself it was all just my imagination. The burning sensation kept amping up, getting worse and worse. I told myself that I didn't want to be that guy and say anything in front of these people, you know? Finally, it got to the point where I had to say something. I asked my coworker with us if there was anything there. She was like, "OMG. There, on my lower back, just to the right of my spine, was a mark that looked like a burn or an abrasion about 3 to 4 long and about 1 inch wide." Now, I'd seen other such claims made by visitors of scratch marks and the like, often writing them off, and the marks were always gone within an hour at most. I had visible marking on my back for almost a week. My nerves there, to this very day, often feel weird, sometimes chilled, sometimes like a skin soreness. Especially when I think on the experience. June 4th, same part of the building, same time of night, because I can't just get enough, right? I noticed that my voice recorder ran out of memory, so I'm holding it in my right hand, using the flashlight in my left so I can see what I'm doing. Suddenly, I felt a burning sensation on the underside of my right forearm, did a WTF, and shifted my flashlight to it. The person beside me and I watched as 3 welts began to appear down my arm. Needless to say, that shit blew my mind. It is one thing to see marks like that, it is a whole other thing to watch it as it happens on your skin. Like the majority of instances I've heard about, those marks were gone within 10 to 15 minutes. No lasting effects. I took a week off work to process it all, and I was nervous being in that hallway for the rest of the summer. Like I said, I still don't know what to think or believe. I've got enough stories of experiences to probably fill a book, but I'll leave you with those for now. I will add a final note about how constantly poking around in the dark and talking about past true horrors of human experience day in and day out truly takes its toll, spiritually and emotionally. Since my resignation, my mental health and overall level of happiness have greatly improved. For a period thereafter, I would tell people that it felt as though I had emerged from a toxic relationship with that environment. How do I tell my dad, who doesn't believe in anything paranormal, that our house is haunted? I am a teen boy, and unlike my father, I very much believe in the paranormal. My mother and father are divorced, and my mother is very much into spiritual and paranormal stuff. That's where I got it from. And my dad loves scary stuff like horror movies, so do I, and last year around about March, I started seeing stuff at my mom's place. I started seeing hands around corners or on the floor. My mom and older brother brushed it off as an overactive imagination since I love horror movies, specifically the ghost ones like The Conjuring, and then at my dad's I started seeing shadow people occasionally. Keep in mind all of these would happen every couple of months until eventually at my mom's they stopped, but the spirits at my dad's never stop. I rewatched The Conjuring 2, and since I love to draw, I drew the nun, a demon nun from the movie franchise. Big mistake. Everything went up to 10, shadow people peeping at me through my doorway, doors opening on their own, whispers, and many more. My friends would see stuff in my room while we were on calls too, people in my closet, hearing whispers. During the summer my best friend came over to hang out, and he saw something in my window. The same thing my other friend saw in that same window 2 months earlier. She did not inform me of her observation until I began inquiring with my friends about any occurrences at my residence. She then told me, and I was mortified. I hated it. I told my dad, and he told me I'm on the devil's lettuce. I wasn't, but then he told me that my great aunt was a psychic, and now all the kids in his generation and my generation of the family have powers, but we don't have much except for me. I think I got more than everyone else. I see stuff that my family can't, I hear stuff that my family can't, and I feel stuff that my family can't. I remember feeling more scared than ever because not only were these ghosts targeting me, but also my dad didn't believe me. I felt alone. I took down the painting, and everything kind of stopped, but I still feel stuff in my room, I still see stuff, and I still hear stuff, just not as much as it used to happen. I hate being alone in that house, it scares me, but my dad doesn't believe me. I don't know what to do. Help. Hauntings, shadow people, mimics, mirror entities, and spirits. I grew up in a haunted house, where I regularly saw shadow people and encountered strange things. It got to the point where I was way too freaked out, so I basically shut out being able to see ghosts and spirits until I got older. I was seeing dark, shadowy figures coming up my stairs when I went to get water in the middle of the night, hearing footsteps in my attic. No one was up there that late, we had a house rule, and finding children's size shoe prints on my ceiling. I could feel something or someone had died in the basement, and the landlady before us kept deadbolt locks on all of the doors before we removed them, including the door to the basement. I still don't know what happened, but that place was a hot spot for paranormal activity. Food would regularly go missing out of our fridge, things would move around, and I was terrified of looking into the mirrors. I used to see demonic-looking entities in them and knew I should just cover them and not engage. One time I saw my eyes go white for a split second in the large dining room mirror and started to dissociate to all hell, but luckily my mom walked into the kitchen and I got snapped out of it. It was this weird feeling of morbid fascination and enthrallment that never quite left me. I wasn't scared, even though I was probably in danger. My TV started to turn on by itself in the middle of the night, pure static, and I'd see this warped face in it. I'd hear weird noises at late hours, and it scared the shit out of me. I religiously kept my closet door closed and blocked off after getting sick of seeing clawed hands creeping out of it in the late hours of the night. I was like 8 and already sick of the bullshit, I just wanted to go the hell to sleep. I had school in the morning. I would communicate with the more friendly of the ghosts sometimes just to ask if they needed anything, using a pendulum. This was when I noticed I was psychic for the first time. I was rather friendly with ghosts as a kid, which I regret now that I know more about spirits, but I digress. No one believed me back then. Everyone I talked to, including parents, blamed my vivid imagination for everything I brought up, and it was fun, plus I was ducking bored. I'm a witch now, so I at least interact more safely these days. If you get shit like this on the regular, the least you can do emo is learn how to protect yourself so you're not left vulnerable. If you've got a haunted mirror, the only thing I can say is avoid looking into it at night. Those things on the other side, they want to replace you. They'll try to make deals with you. Keep them covered, or locked if you know how to do that. Whatever was trying to attach to me as a kid went from the mirror to my TV, and I knew if I didn't do something, she'd find another way. So I unplugged my TV and put it in the attic, Then covered that damn mirror and put that in the attic too. That was one haunted attic by the time we left. Honestly, I wonder if she was the one making all those footsteps. Now, I live in a completely different house, and the old one has been completely renovated, so I'm confident the spirits were released and can have peace and all that. This is one thing the friendly, light-looking spirits asked me for as a kid, and the little goody two-shoes I was made a promise that I'd do what I could to bring the spirits peace and stop the next family from suffering. The only thing is, I think the shadow people followed me. Or rather, I can still get new ones from time to time, now that I've let in that sixth sense again. They look different, so probably the latter, but I've also seen one at my partner's house that looks eerily similar to the one that walked up my stairs towards me as a kid. You already know I covered the TV for a while after that. Usually I see the shadow people out of the corner of my eye. I'll just see them watching me, usually from around a corner. Sometimes they're taller than a human is supposed to be, lanky with sharp teeth, and slouched in the doorway to fit through. Their eyes are small slits, like they're grinning. I don't like seeing those ones. I draw them sometimes to lessen the fear, but it usually just makes things worse. Other times, they're small and childlike and just seem more curious than anything. I have one small one who particularly likes to spook me while I'm up late at my desk. They sit under my desk by my right leg and pop out from time to time while I'm drawing or gaming. I've learned to just ignore them. Giving them attention makes them braver, and well, I don't necessarily want them braver than they already are. Anyway, I still keep all my doors shut religiously. I don't want to deal with more spooky times regarding coming out of my closet. That's too much for me. These guys just seem more mischievous than anything. They just want to get a rise from me. They're attention starved, and my mom can't see them, so they come for me. Sometimes they tap my shoulder or my leg while I'm sitting at my desk, or my head when I'm in the living room. I've never felt in danger around them, except for the one with sharp teeth. It doesn't seem they have malicious intentions, but I tend to keep my distance and hold boundaries solid. This isn't me telling you to interact with yours or anything, especially if you're provoking them intentionally. This is just my experience. Ignoring has become my best policy. There's another entity that lives here too and likes to make noise. This one, it's not just me that hears it. My partner has when he visits, and my mom does sometimes too. Oh, and I should mention, he saw the shadow person who appeared in front of his TV before, at the same time as me. This second thing I've never seen, but it mimics us. It'll sound exactly like me to get my mom's attention or my partner to call me down the stairs before he even gets here. Again, it doesn't seem malicious, and nothing bad has happened to any of us from answering or following the sound. All of the interactions have happened in broad daylight, unlike the shadow people. Those are always at night, and usually it seems more like a time delay kind of thing, if that makes sense. Like, with my partner, I heard him clearly say up the stairs, "Hi, baby." And the door creaks open like it always does. I went downstairs, and the door was still shut and locked, and my partner wasn't there yet. I walked outside, and as I did, his car pulled up in the driveway. It was like the mimic-like entity just wanted to give me a heads up, if anything, which is confusing. And the times my mom has heard me calling for her, I've actually had something to ask her or was about to call for her, but just hadn't made the sounds yet. It's so fascinating to me and gets me thinking about time travel a lot. Time magic is something I'm deeply interested in and have experienced, so it kind of checks out that the house I'm in would carry residual side effects like this. Unfortunately, it's not something I can really elaborate on, since getting into the wrong hands could be disastrous. I just have theories here, nothing concrete. Oh, and this guy likes bells for some reason. I have a little bell I ring sometimes when I need to focus and can't get out of my head. For whatever reason, he shows up more frequently the more I ring the bell. It makes me believe he might be Fae-aligned somehow. Oh, and yeah, I do deal with demonic entities on the regular. I don't usually see them manifest physically in my space, like when I was a kid, but I'll sense them and hear them speak in my head. Again, strong boundaries. Don't make deals. Don't let anyone persuade or coerce you to make friends. You never have to let anyone or anything into your space that isn't welcome. A lot of times demonic entities are more powerful than humans, but even they follow rules. If you visit often, learning these rules keeps you out of trouble. Stay safe. Lastly, there's a third fella that makes noise occasionally. He's broken a glass before and slammed cupboards closed, and he likes to move things out of place. I have strict boundaries with my household visitors and told him that if he were to continue being welcome here, he better stop making messes. Since then, nothing like that has happened. I still occasionally find things moved around, mostly scissors, pens, crystals, notebooks, and stationery items that could feasibly have been moved by me or my mom, but neither of us remembers moving them. I'm sure one of you by now is thinking, Why do you let any entity into your space if there's so much potential danger? To this, I say that life would be so much more ducking boring without them. I get lonely. They keep me company. And they make for fun stories and interactions. Also, closing the door again gives me constant migraines, it blocks the shit out of my third eye, and it makes my life more difficult. If this is how I naturally am, so be it. I do work with a deity who protects me and kicks out any entities who pose a threat as well these days, so that very much helps me balance out. Oh yeah, and this one doesn't really fit neatly anywhere, but our technology glitches very frequently, especially if my mom and I talk about the hauntedness. Both of our laptops have been known to start playing and then pause audio on their own, from all the way across the room, with mine getting really funky and glitching out in the process, usually while watching movies. One time in particular I was watching one of those horror movies about possession, and I joke you not, the screen was playing an ad, Tubi, I think, so ads, while the possessed girl was just screaming over the AD in the background while the AD kept playing. I caught it on camera but then deleted it because I wasn't sure if the attention would make things worse. The last thing I would want to do is spread a haunting through technology somehow, like that thing that tried to jump to my TV as a kid. It really ducking freaked me out, and I couldn't stop the ad or the audio from playing out loud. Usually if this happens I know to just shut up and increase my protection. Anyway, cheers from the second haunted house I've ever lived in, or maybe I'm just someone who attracts paranormal happenings. Who knows? They've kind of just been around my whole life. I get the chills and everything during visitations, and I generally can figure out who's around based on the vibe. I cleanse the house really often too, so that's not the issue here. It's nothing like when I was a kid and had limited knowledge from, like, horror movies, at the very least. I know what to do if anything too freaky happens. Generally spirits just make my life more interesting. If you've made it this far, thank you for taking your time to listen to this. Hope you enjoyed listening. Have a great week ahead.